Hi, it's Leondegrance. This is a conversation I had with Doulas A. Burton, the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, which is an alternative and a companion to the hero's journey, archetypal storytelling. Okay, hello
Okay.
everybody. We are here today with Doulas A. Burton, who is going to have a fantastic discussion with us about a movie that we absolutely love, and that is Excalibur 1981. This is going to be so much fun. Now,
Yes.
and Douglas, do you have any personal connection to this movie? Like, what were your first thoughts about this movie, the first time you saw this movie as an experience?
So in 1981, I was 5 years old. This was not a movie that my parents were interested in showing me.
Yes.
I had very limited understanding of what medieval, history was, and
Yes.
why people would wear entire suits of armor. But I will say this: there is a weird tie-in. This was 1981, so this was very early in the 80s. This was one of the first movies that my parents recorded on
Ooh.
VHS. So I'll never forget, and I probably still have it somewhere, this VHS tape with the handwritten thing on the side.
Yes.
That said Excalibur. Yeah, so there's a VHS tape with Excalibur. So this has been etched in my brain. There's certain movies in particular that I remember on handwritten on the side of these VHS tapes, and Excalibur was one of them. And I remember one time putting it in and hitting play and being like, "What is Excalibur?" Oh, because my dad also played like recreational league softball, right, with his brothers and neighbors and stuff. And he had this huge, like 35-inch bat or 34-inch bat, I can't remember, a huge wooden bat, and he called it Excalibur. So every time he went to go play softball, he's like, "Doug, go get me Excalibur." So I would go behind the door and grab this wooden bat and hand it to him, and I asked him, I was like, why did you call your bat Excalibur? It doesn't say that on the bat. It says Louisville Slugger.
Yeah.
And so he explained, he's like, "Oh, King Arthur pulled the sword from the stuff." So one day I put in the VHS tape, I threw it in the thing, and I hit play. And, it opens with like silhouettes of men on horseback and with fire. And I was like, ooh, conflict right away, right?
Yes.
And then like 2 seconds later, this guy's like banging on this guy, and he's got this like suit of armor. I'm like, ooh, I don't know about that. Like, it was pretty violent for a kid, and I kind of balked on it. But I did end up watching it later, and it's so weird. For years, that chrome silver sparkle that this movie is what stuck in my mind from like childhood. That, like they're wearing mirrors or something. And anyway, that detail has stuck with me from like my early childhood brain all the way through.
Oh yeah, it's like they were wearing disco balls.
Yeah, totally. And honestly, it's part of what makes it Excalibur now, that you're going to get this real disco shine off their armor and the swords that are coming out and everything. So
so great. So
what about you?
Oh, for me, it was like always there. It was like air, it's like, oh, Excalibur. I believe we went to the movie theater to see it, and I probably didn't know what I was watching, but it was really cool. Sword, beautiful people, just the spectacle of it, the music, of course. I think the thing that was really the most interesting is, of course, they had it playing a lot on television, like late night television, or they'll have it like on some weekend. And all of the, like, there isn't so many naughty moments, but there was, like one in the beginning. But
there's one major one and one minor one.
Yeah, and that was all like edited in a weird way where I didn't understand what was going on. I was like, well, okay, well, so I didn't really learn about that stuff until I finally got to watch movies on my own. We did the same thing too. We recorded Excalibur. Again, it was there was commercials, and so it was so messy and cut up in such weird ways. You couldn't really get to examine the story as we can now. The visual iconography is just so powerful. There's certain visuals from this movie that just are unique to this movie, and also it is like incredibly powerful. Stirs up a feeling.
This is a weird film of certain awkwardly sloppy elements that I don't care about. I don't care that it's sloppy. In fact, the imperfection of it all is actually oddly part of what makes the charm of this movie work. But if somebody were to try to break this down logically and start criticizing the film for where it falls short, there are things that you can be like, oh, yeah. Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. And then at the end of that list, I'm always like, but I don't care. Like, I just don't care. It doesn't affect me in a way that turned me off from the film. In fact, the film still holds such a high place for me. So some films get away with this, and I think you just said it. It stirs up certain feelings. It stirs up a certain feeling, a certain mood, a certain atmosphere, a certain sense of adventure and mythology. And so on that note, it just is a total home run for me. And and because that note's so high, some of these other technical things just I don't get hung up on them.
It's irrelevant to me because I actually don't really see them. They just disappear for me. Is it the right armor for the time period?
Right. I've heard that. That's correct.
The right fighting styles, the right swords, the right, like the semantics of it all. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I hear that. But this is a theatrical vision of King Arthur's life. And also there are certain themes and like moralistic themes that we're going to hit on those that I think is also very important, because by the end of the movie, you feel uplifted.
Uplifted and kind of a little bit like of pure excitement, like a thrill, because the scenarios that are created are not like messy day-to-day stuff. It's mythological scenarios, and they're played out in front of you. The scenarios that don't exist, like he encounters a knight that can't be defeated. He defeats all, Lancelot defeats all his best knights. The king goes to fight and then uses Excalibur briefly, to win the fight, and then has this moral, those are strange morals, right? That we don't, I've never had a magic sword like that. And, these scenarios, but then there is still an ethic at the bottom of that about, the use of force, and also calling in a special thing when it's supposed to be an honorable fight. You still are left with these impressions. These moral impressions.
They stick with you, and I'm gonna get to that in a second. But
I didn't want to get in too much detail. I was just using that as an example. Like when I'm watching of what will thrill me, this moral impression that's left on me in this mythological motif, in this 70s silver sheen of like it's its own brand of mythology in this movie.
It's just great, and I love every minute of it. And as I've gotten older, I found myself laughing at so many moments where I'm like, oh, that was supposed to be goofy, but that is a funny joke if you really know the entire story. So, and we're going to get to those as well. But I wanted to just begin with talking about the movie.
And even the way they use the font, that they're tapping into that silver chrome sheen that I was talking about. That is a lasting brand aspect about this film that really distinguishes it. That silvery sheen,
that twinkle that you see in everything. It's beautiful. So about the film, this is the legend of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, loosely based on 3 books. Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Mallory, The Golden Bough by James George Fraser, and From Ritual to Romance by Jesse L. Weston. And the film is named after the legendary sword of King Arthur that features prominently in Arthurian literature. So that is just the basic. It stars Nigel Terry as Arthur, and Nicol Williamson as Merlin, Nicholas Clay as Lancelot, Cherie Lungi as Guinevere, Helen Mirren as Morgana, Liam Neeson as Gawain, Gabriel Byrne as Uther Pendragon, one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, Pendragon. He's great in this.
It's great. And Patrick Stewart as Leondegrance, another one that I really love. And this is the theatrical debut for Gabriel Byrne, Liam Neeson, Tyrion Hines, and Cherie Lungi. And the film soundtrack features music from Richard Wagner, Carl Off, along with original score by Trevor Jones. And I'll let you take this part of it. You wanted to talk about the music in this movie.
So I am a complete fanatic when it comes to soundtrack music. I have a huge collection. I will buy soundtracks that you just can't pick up anymore. In fact, I have the Excalibur soundtrack. That's it right there. and you know, this is the 1981. It was re-released. It has 18 tracks. It's such an unusual soundtrack in that it prominently emphasizes music not from Trevor Jones. So they hired Trevor Jones to write music for this. And Trevor Jones actually wrote some of the score for like the Excalibur theme and all these other things.
Yes, so good.
Right? And the director's like, I can't get Richard Wagner out of my head. So he punted on Trevor Jones's Arthurian themes, which were probably excellent. In fact, it's on the soundtrack. I've heard it. It is excellent. But you know, if you've grown up watching this movie, you cannot get the Wagner version of bum bum. You know, the opening thing. You know, you just can't get that out of your head. So now that I hear, you know, so late in life that I hear Trevor Jones say this is what it should have been, now it's hard for me to replace that. So but they went with Richard Wagner, like you said, George Orff. That music for a decade or so defined in any world where people really got into soundtrack music, defined the most epic sounding choral music that you could summon for a movie. You know, and if you've listened to it, it starts soft, ba, 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 and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, these people are like belting out this like choral music, and you know, the king's riding, and there's like peach, you know, blossoms flying in its face. It's epic music, and it's George Orff and James Horner based. If you've ever seen the movie Glory with Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman and Matthew Broderick, there's a track in that soundtrack called "Charging Fort Wagner," which was based off George Orff when James Horner saw this movie. So he wanted that kind of an epic feel. He just, you know, 19th centuryized it with bugles. You know, Civil War bugles back there, but this epic choral music as the 54th Regiment charges Fort Wagner, and it is awesome.
Yeah,
and I knew that music before I knew this music. So when I came back to the source, and I was like, "Whoa, it's medieval knights riding off to war with this like great choral music." It's just fantastic. And Trevor Jones is also well known for writing medieval sounding music. He's got a great sound to it. Igraine's dance is my favorite. Like, it's great. It's fantastic. And then he has variations of that later in Camelot. And I've listened to it regularly for decades. Excalibur's been in my playlist. And then Trevor Jones also wrote one of my all-time favorite soundtracks, Last of the Mohicans. One of the best soundtracks I think ever written. So here's some of Trevor's early work in Excalibur. If you get the soundtrack, you will not be disappointed. It is fantastic.
Yes, and I also wanted to make sure to mention that he also worked on the Dark Crystal and the Labyrinth as well.
Yes, two other great ones.
You know, when you mention Igraine's dance, the music really reminded me of Conan the Barbarian soundtrack, 1982. That's Basil
Polidorus.
Yeah. But when I heard that, I was like, "Ooh, this really feels like it's about that time," and it makes me think, okay, kind of Dark Ages, Hyborian Age would have been kind of like just before then, or you know, just around that period in time. So it just is sort of exciting to hear related tissue music. You know, it's like, oh yeah, it also makes you want to dance too.
Yeah, the medieval music that Trevor Jones wrote for Excalibur is very dance worthy. It's got a great lively sound to it, and it really captures that medieval world. So a lot of people who like soundtracks or who role play always are like, where can I find good medieval music? Excalibur is a great starting point. Dark Crystal's got a great one called the Pod Dance. In fact, it's both Trevor Jones. They're very similar. There's similar instrumentation in both.
Flute, lots of flutes, and love it, love it, love it. We have to get to the part where we're talking about the director, John Boorman. I love this guy.
Yeah.
John Boorman actually directed, co-written, and produced this film. So he had a big hand in it, and he does do that with quite a lot of his movies. He is responsible for movies like Point Blank in 1967, Hell in the Pacific in 1968, Deliverance 1972, Zardoz 1974, one of my favorites.
Oh, nice.
It's a weird favorite. Then there's The Exorcist 2, The Heretic, which I didn't hate. Thought that was really funny. And The Emerald Forest, which is actually starring his son. He loves putting his family in these movies.
Yeah, as we'll find out.
As we'll find out very, very soon. But I'll hand this off to you as we talk about story and the origins of story.
So a couple things. One, he wasn't starting with Excalibur. He actually was going to be involved in Lord of the Rings. It's funny because Lord of the Rings, had that story alone has had such a backstory in and of itself. From Tolkien's writing to the rights being sold to the animated film to finally Peter Jackson kind of cementing it on film. So it's such an ambitious task. And John Boorman wanted to tackle that. Yeah. Obviously he did not set his bar low. He wanted Lord of the Rings and he was going to do it. It seemed like it was in the works and going to happen. And then it got canceled. He had gotten kind of far along in the development process, at least in his mind, in terms of what he planned. And so when it got canceled, he really wasn't ready to give up on that. Even though that door was shut. So what he ended up doing is shifting some of that medieval fantasy power imagination, shifting it right over into the King Arthur legend, where there's a fit. There is a fit. Some things match up. There are Arthurian archetypes in Lord of the Rings. Yes. This comes from British. This is like a British mythological motif, which is what Lord of the Rings was. So is Excalibur and King Arthur. So this was a good match. That if you're going to strike out with Lord of the Rings, you can't do much worse than or much better than King Arthur. As your replacement. So the stars aligned. He got the King Arthur story. He called it Excalibur, and he decided to go all in on it. They didn't have a huge budget for it. So $11 million. To give you a comparison, this came out in 1981. That's roughly the same budget as Empire Strikes Back, which might sound like, oh, wow, so it's epic. No, Empire Strikes Back is famous for what it was able to do on $11 million.
Yes.
So when you think about $11 million, that's not that much. But for 1981, it was considered a decent amount of money. It made $34 million worldwide, which, to be honest, there really wasn't an international box office in 1981. So like 99.9% of that $34 million worldwide comes from the United States. So it's really a domestic box office haul. It made money. Yeah. It made money. So this was a successful film commercially. However, at the time it came out, it was not a critically acclaimed movie. Ooh, in fact, I went back and rewatched for pure pleasure. Siskel and Ebert, 1981, reviewing Excalibur, and those two guys were not happy. Siskel was like, "Oh God, this is what a hodgepodge. Thumbs down for me." And Ebert's like, Gene, I got to agree with you. This thing didn't make sense. They didn't seem to have Act 3 and and then then Ebert would turn to the camera. So that's 2 thumbs down for us. And I was like, dang, man, that was harsh.
Yeah.
So this was not well received by the critics.
Yeah, it found its legs in syndication, and it also, did well with VHS. And so I think its cult following just kept growing and growing. And even to this day, like when I watch recent movie reviewers, a lot of people don't seem to understand the pattern of how this story is going. So it sort of takes people out of the experience. I, for some reason, love it. I didn't care. I don't care.
Well, but I don't think you're alone. I think most of the critics are a little off the mark on this. So it's easy to criticize a movie, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I do it. I'm like, this movie didn't have this. It didn't have this. This doesn't make sense. So a lot of movies are worthy of criticism, but you have to ask some questions at the end of it. Did it work? Despite all the flaws, did it work? And and that doesn't mean do some people like it, because some people will like every movie, right?
Yes.
Did this leave an impression? Did this have some lasting impact? Is there some elusive quality to this movie that just makes it likable despite the flaw? And I think this movie exemplifies exactly that.
Now, I love this movie so much, and I really love a lot of the themes and ideas that I feel are impressive in the stories. Now, I think one of the main themes is definitely lust and temptation. It's mentioned several times. We kind of talk about the dangers of lust and temptation, of sex and power, and to oppose that, as sort of the other side of that, the virtues of truth, hope, forgiveness, and ultimately redemption. And so there's also, like, not so much in the beginning where you have like a good versus evil, but by the end you really feel like, this is definitely a good versus evil triumph
Right.
that's happening. In totality, I know a lot of people were looking to find, like, okay, well, why does it feel messy? And I think it feels messy for a lot of people because this is, in a nutshell, the life of King Arthur from conception to his death. And
Really, there's a prologue to his whole conception. Like,
yeah,
I mean, when you think about it, that whole opening, which is pretty iconic, that's just a prologue to how Arthur was conceived. So,
yeah.
And they spent a lot of time on it.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. They begin with saying that it's the Dark Ages, just to set the mood. And we start off with a lot of fog, and this really intense battle in the dark. And this is like guys with real armor, real swords. Yeah. You hear the clank. You're like, wow, that sounds pretty nasty.
Oh, yeah.
As far as like metal to metal, there's something primal when you hear that sound. When you hear the sound of, these battle axes and morning stars like hitting people, and they're like, and they're like swinging over horses. And I mean, God bless the stunt people in this. It's just insane.
Well, and historically, like when you're watching a movie, when you get hit with a sword, that's the end of it. In this movie, you get hit with a sword, you might fall, they might hit you again, and you're like, oh, and then you get up, and you're just taking these hits. It's just like banging metal against metal, and I'd never seen anything like that.
Yeah,
that you would withstand these massive blows and then live on to return fire. Basically, it was so barbaric and so harsh and violent and visceral. I just never seen anything like it.
And like just this picture here, you see the fire and the smoke and fog as well. And this is all kind of setting the mood for this. Not only is it the Dark Ages, it is a war that has been taking a toll on the people involved. Now, just to come out of the movie a little bit, this was a very intensely hard scene to shoot. They actually shot this entire movie in Ireland, at Ardmore Studios, and then a lot of the areas around there. And they tried to get as many Irish actors and crew as they could for the film. But the initial fight scene had to be filmed 3 times. All of the film came out underexposed. There was some kind of fault that happened with the exposure meter. So ultimately, the cameraman unfortunately had a breakdown, and he had to quit the project, and they had to hire somebody new to do this, which is really not easy. Once you've got all your pre-production done, you've got to like train somebody to kind of catch up with what's going on. Now, I think if you're not a fight expert, this is going to be a fantastic, great intro. But for there are a lot of people who criticize, like, no, they're not really doing a lot of strategic fighting here. And maybe that was the point too of this. It looked really impressive, and you don't want to get hit by a morning star, even with with armor on, because it will knock you down. This is dangerous stuff. We get also too the music. It starts off really dark and mysterious, and then it's like it just gets more almost triumphant. So there's like a sense of triumph in this whole thing, which is like almost like coming out of the earth, almost blossoming,
primordial.
Primordial. And I believe they called this one, the song is Siegfried's funeral music. Very impressive, because it sets the precedence that this is going to be an epic tale right from the beginning. And
very ominous tones.
Yes. And that is exactly what music can really lend to a project like this, or your movie or your TV show. That first sound that people get, like, what is it going to be? And this really laid the carpet down for what we get later on, which is just incredible. And the next thing, the first person we see is Merlin.
Yeah. Merlin.
Yes, and I think we off camera we were talking about Merlin. That Boorman was actually writing something of a Merlin character. What were your exact words?
Yeah, he had this whole thing about he wanted an eccentric Merlin.
Yes.
So he was trying to break away from the Gandalf Arthurian archetype, the wise old man with the staff. So he wanted Merlin to be younger and a little weird. And although that project never materialized, the eccentric Merlin carried right over, and we get big time eccentric Merlin in Excalibur. And I would even argue that he is part of what makes this story so unique and distinctive.
I think so. For me, Merlin is a unique character, but the way he plays him in this, first of all, we get the theatrics, right? And a lot of the actors that are used in the film are stage actors, the main character actors. He's giving it a lot more flair, and he's changing up the inflections that you think, oh, he's going to say it this way. He says it totally like, whoa, look at her.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on here? What is he doing?
Totally.
And I think at first, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, he's interesting. Reminded me, because of the skull cap that he's wearing, the silver skull cap. I thought immediately felt like Flash Gordon.
Ming the Merciless?
Ming the Merciless.
Oh,
Really interesting, because Max von Sydow was supposed to play Merlin in the very early stages. And so he felt like a character that you didn't know if he was good or evil. And that was when I first saw him. And the first time you kind of experience this movie, you're like, is he, by the end, you're like, oh yeah, he's a good guy. But initially you're just sort of like, who is this guy? Is he doing this on purpose? Is he a bad, malevolent creature that is trying to hurt people? And he's actually not at all. He is, and I would say, a sproutling of the world, the earth itself. He's of the earth, connected to the earth. And there's a couple of scenes where we can discuss it further on. He talks about the dragon
Yes.
and that the dragon is all around us, and the fog is also another representation of the dragon's breath.
Yep.
And that is the earth that when he talks about the dragon, is a representation of the earth. And it took me quite a few viewings to see that. And I was like, oh, I get it now. The dragon is magic. It's magic on earth. There's a scene later on where Arthur, as a boy, has Excalibur, and he says, this sword, it's part of the dragon too. And he's like, yes,
You
you're
learn
learning.
quickly.
Yes. And it's like, that is really part of the magic that we're experiencing. So I love all of these, like, subtle, I would say, symbolism, because it's not explained to you. No
Right.
one
Yeah.
is
They don't try to
going
get
to
technical with
explain.
it at all.
Yeah,
And it
they
didn't need
never.
to.
Yeah, they never explain it, and I think that was what some people were really kind of confused about, like, "What is this? They keep talking about a dragon when we never saw the dragon." Like, you did, you actually did.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the dragon was kind of an allegory for what you're saying, the idea of magic on Earth. That is what the dragon encompasses. So it
Yeah,
was more of a semantic dragon than a literal dragon.
exactly, and so I loved all of that.
Yeah, and Merlin, I think you're right. The way he was played. And by the way, when I first saw this, I was kind of jarred
Yeah.
by the portrayal of Merlin as a kid. You know, I was like, oh, what? That's Merlin? Like, I didn't get it. But
Yeah,
now, when I watch it, I'm like, oh, Merlin. This is the weird Merlin. And now he's integral. Like his like kind of bizarre behavior patterns is good. It keeps him detached from the rest of humanity. So when he delivers those kind of godly lines, the
yes.
inhuman, like, he's like, I am of this earth. What does he say? He's like, how could you not get mad at Uther? He's like, it's easy to admire folly in an infant.
Yes.
So he's telling you how he sees someone like Uther, that we see as a great warlord. He's like, he's just a little guy. Look at him.
Yes.
So
He does.
his bizarreness, I think, helps deliver those lines and sell them.
Yes, and he also makes the movie very interesting. Like, if this is kind of one of your, movies that let's say this is not exactly your type of film. I think a character like this is perplexing. You don't know what he's going to do at any point, so it keeps you on your toes. I feel you don't know what he's going to say or what he's going to offer, if he's going to help you get the girl, or if he's going to
entrap you.
Yeah, you never know. The next character we meet is Uther Pendragon.
This guy was great.
I love him. Oh my God. Played
He
by
played him so
Gabriel Byrne.
purely.
Yes, I mean, the first line that he says is like, I'm great, I'm fabulous.
Yeah, he's like, I'm the strongest one here.
Yes,
Like, I'm amazing.
Yeah, he's so in love with himself, but he's also, every line he says is very, like, brash, and he orders everyone around. It's like, where's my sword? He doesn't really have a sweet point until there's one moment, and it's totally, undone right after.
Yeah,
But
I mean, immediately undone. He's like, I'm ready to, like, mature. And it's like, sorry.
Sorry, no, you
You
don't
made
get
a
to
bad
do that.
deal.
Yeah. His thing is, he loves battle. He loves the excitement of exacting a battle. And I guess once you, like, understand the entire story, you understand where his place is in the story. He is there to initiate, I would say, layer of getting to have this king, right? So initially, Merlin thought that the king would be Uther. And I'm sure, like, and this is probably prior to it, through the conversation, it feels like maybe he was promised the kingdom if he did some military strategies or military missions that Merlin had told him to do. He did those things, and he's like, okay, well, I can't lead without the sword, and so he's yelling for this sword. Merlin at this point is like, okay, well, he's done everything. Let's get him the sword. And so we've got this really interesting scene where Merlin is just looking out into the lake, and we're just
Love
like,
it.
the cinematography here is just beautiful because you just see the lake, and then all of a sudden this hand just comes out.
Yeah.
And
It's a great
slow
shot.
motion. It's in slow motion. It's not in like real time, it just makes it so much more epic. And the first thing you want to know is, how are they doing this? Like, there's some lady underneath the water.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
exactly.
is just
Poor
like,
lady.
it's got the sword and she's holding it up, and which is true. And every once in a while, they'll show you a lady who's clearly in a studio, and it looks like she's underwater. That particular,
The Lady of the Lake.
yes, Hilary Joyelle, she played the Lady of the Lake. And just so that way people know, the Lady of the Lake is an enchantress who lives in a castle under a lake around the island of Avalon. And in the legend, she is known for giving Arthur the magical sword, Excalibur. It's just so grand.
It is. And they even have, honestly, I love this scene because no matter what you feel about the violence of the opening, when this scene hits, you're in a magical mythology. And they have this close up of the blade piercing the water and coming right up. And you can see, even in the photo you took, there's like this green, which the color green light shouldn't be here. But it's as if the forest is glowing now or something that's reflecting this. So it's an odd color to be reflecting off this mirror-like blade. So this scene just captures that imagination, I think, and really gets you into this mythological world.
Yes, and I believe that the green light that is reflected from Excalibur is as the dragon magic.
Yes, that's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Yeah, it is the dragon magic. Merlin talks about Excalibur healing and uniting the land.
Not to hack.
Yeah. So he is, when you listen to what Merlin really has to say, when you don't listen to how he's saying it, but you actually look at the words that he's saying, Merlin is saying that the Excalibur sword is a symbol that not only is it a symbol, but it actually can heal the land, because at this point that land is a mess. It's nothing will grow, and there's decay. All sorts of terrible things are happening.
Right.
So the sword is here to heal and unite the land.
Yes. And that is a major theme in this movie.
Yes.
The land and the king are one.
Yes. And the king is not a king without the sword.
Right. And there is this, what's interesting about Merlin is there's this kind of arm's length that he has. He's not like trying to sell this idea. He will tell you and then kind of sit back like, oh, that's an interesting development. Oh, this guy's kind of a bad egg. That's interesting. He's not trying to steer the events at that point. He's kind of hands off with it. And so, but the message remains, the king and the land are one. That message of, he's like, I want the sword. And he's like, to heal, not to hack. That's the same message that he wants Arthur to learn later, which Arthur is better. And this is what makes Arthur great too. And we'll get into it later. He's flawed. He has his downturn. He has some downturn before he kind of recovers. I think you're 100% correct that the green reflective light, what I was saying was that this would be an unnatural color to be shining off of the. I think you're correct. The reason it is there is because it is the magic of the dragon that is reflecting off of this blade.
Yes. And I think specifically green is like green leaves, foliage.
Yeah, life.
The color of things that grow, So
also dragons you think of as like reptilian, green,
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that was really kind of a wondrous moment, and I love that
Oh yeah.
we're definitely now inserting, like you said, magic is now a part of the equation here.
Yeah,
This is not
and
something that you find every day. Like you don't go to the lake and then some ladies in there with a sword.
well, and it's like it should be disturbing that
Yeah,
there's somebody under the water like that, but it's so magical that
yeah,
it becomes that's where the mythology comes in, that
yeah,
mythological feel that, oh my God,
yeah,
who is that? And then you get the sense she's like a goddess, and we
yeah.
do see her later. But yeah, this scene here, I mean, of all the scenes in the movie, this might be the most famous scene in the movie.
It is. Besides the other three times that she appears, wonderful. Love the Lady of the Lake, and and like 50 other scenes that are in this movie. They're all iconic. It's
Well,
sick.
there are well, totally. Listen, and I say that like that this is arguably the best scene because there are
It
a
is.
million other cases to be made. And I just wanted to say something as tough as on the movie as critics were at the time.
Yeah.
This was nominated for best cinematography in the
Yes.
Academy Awards,
Yes. It
and it's
did.
for scenes like this.
And so we have, Uther pretending to be king. He's got the bravery part, and he's got the stature. But Merlin is really guiding him all the way through to do with any of the negotiations and like talking. Okay, he's given, now you give, like
Well, and this is where Merlin, the sword of power. This is where he's getting kind of goofy on us, and we're like, "Who is this guy? Like, this guy's
yeah.
like horsing around in this like critical negotiation." And what you just said is the part that makes me laugh now
Yeah.
because Uther is so one dimensional, and it's not a bad one dimensional nature.
Yeah.
He's a pure warrior, and he
Yeah.
has the warrior ethos. It's uncompromising. So he's like, I want the sword. He's just like
Yeah.
single mindedly obsessed with it.
Yes.
Merlin gives it to him, and then of course he's like, "Do you yield?" The Duke of Cornwall is like, "If I yield, what will you yield?" And of course, Uther's like, "Yield
Yeah.
me?" And Merlin nudges him and is like, "Give him something." So he's like, "You will have the land from here to the sea as long as you enforce the king's laws." And he's
Yes.
like, "Done." And you get this great sense of like male bonding there.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
is
Yes.
quote unquote toxic as men can be, when the fighting is over, a lot of times guys will shake it off and shake hands, and it's forgotten. And
Yeah.
these two guys just embody that spirit of we're enemies until we're not, and now we're
Yeah.
buds.
Yeah.
And this is
And
a
they
blood oath.
actually do, yeah, they actually do a blood oath, which is like, okay, this is binding.
Yeah,
Um,
it lasts like a minute.
a minute later, Duke of Cornwall, so high on his, like, the fact that they've been able to solve this war, he says, I'm going to have my wife dance for us.
Well,
And
he kind of
he
taunts
also
it. He
teases,
does it.
yeah,
He does it in a brotherly way,
yeah,
but it's enough to be like to sting. He's like, you might have the sword of power, you might be king, but you'll never have a queen as hot as my wife. And it's
yes.
like, and of course, Uther
Ooh,
takes this like a challenge.
yeah.
And I
I mean,
love it. I love how he right there, he's sipping, and then she comes out and she's dancing, and he's like, he sees her, and then there's a cut, and then it shows him again, and he's like looking at the other guys. The other guys are looking at him like,
it's like,
dude, he's pretty
boy.
hot.
Yeah. Everybody is like chanting at the end, or they're like, banging the table while she's dancing.
Yeah.
And Cornwall could not be any more prouder that he has such a sexy wife. He's like, yeah, that's my wife. No one will have her.
He's
And
got this great look where he's like admiring her while she's dancing. And I'm always like, dude, you are like seconds away from this blowing up in your face.
yes. Again, I want to impress
Yeah.
upon that the lust being something that is sort of a common theme here. We had, the two men negotiating their lust for power, and Cornwall for his power of some kind, or to maintain, his lifestyle. And then we have Uther, who wants to be king, and he wants to do it by force if he wants, but he has to listen to Merlin to help him with almost every aspect of negotiations. And then we have Lust now, the Duke of Cornwall, for his own wife, of course, but it's more like a prideful Lust.
Yeah, he's kind of like, man, she is tip top.
Yes, he's like, he does something with his lip, and he's like, woof.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, like I love it. It's so interesting to me for whatever reason that reaction he has stayed with me for whatever reason.
Yes.
This like, because he comes across to me as the more noble of the two men.
Yes.
And he's admiring his wife.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the dangers of lust, but I actually got the sense that it was utter admiration for her beauty. And he couldn't help himself but admire her. Like his chin is up. Like it's a noble posture. And he's like, perfection.
Yeah.
And then you've got Uther who's like, oh man, like I got to do something about this. Like I can't just see her and not react.
But I feel like there was sort of like a lustful kind of the way he was kind of like, oh, there was something going on there.
I think the taunting part totally reinforces what you're saying, that he is a lusty man himself. I'm just saying that one look of his came across to me as utter admiration for his wife.
Yes.
A noble, a slightly more noble man than Uther, who is just brooding with lust.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. I would say he's slightly more, from what we didn't really get a whole lot of him, but Uther is like totally in the wrong for everything he does almost.
Like, no question about it.
Yes. And so we have this moment when he realizes, what? you want my wife?
It's like Uther's like not hiding this anymore. Like this is getting serious.
Yeah, it was really insane to see that they kind of had to come to this moment where they're like, okay, the alliance is over. It's now we're storming the castle, and that's what
great too, because in film terms, it goes from celebrating the victory, the alliance, the end of the war, in about 12 seconds.
Yes.
It goes from that moment to what you just said. He's realizing Uther's lusting for his wife. Uther realizes he's like, and they're like, rah! And they're growling at each other. And then there's a cut, and then they're like battering down the door again. I'm like, dude, that escalated quickly.
Yes. And I think this is the moment in which Merlin is like, yeah, you're not gonna be king.
Uther's not king material.
Yeah, he kind of chastised him a little bit, but it from the conversation you get, he's a little bit disappointed. But as soon as he thinks of Igraine, he's like, ooh, yes, I'll help you get Igraine, because he sees something there that's going to help him to achieve this thing that he wants. And I think believe that Merlin's motivation is to heal the earth, and by having that king who can unite the kingdoms. And so I think when he hears Igraine, that's how he can move forward. That's his new plan. That's his pivot. Okay.
Right. Because
sorry, Uther, you're not the one.
Well, and he's unreasonable, right? I mean, when you really back down and think about it, there's not many men that are going to destroy a geopolitical alliance of huge consequence because you have to sleep with your rival's wife. You have to. Yeah. Like there's other women. It's not like this is the last woman on earth. So it is an awfully reckless, even from male standards. Extremely reckless decision making. I think us guys are like we kind of get it, but we would never risk all this.
Yes.
But then but this guy does.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, so he's that guy. Like, he doesn't care about anything. And you're right. Merlin double thinks, but he quarterbacks it, like, from the sidelines. He's like, okay, Uther's out. He wants to sleep with her. So you could see the wheels are turning. He's got plan B, which is for him to punt and wait 10 years,
Yeah. there are so many pivotal moments in this movie, and we're still on the beginning because it is really that juicy. It matters. You know, this conversation was very important, even though Merlin is like, he actually is saying very important things. And so
Yes.
he says, I'll do it for you if you promise that whatever you produce from this union, you give to me. And of course, Uther gets down on his knees in seconds and says, yes, anything. And that's like this crazy, lusty, like, I need a grain. He feels like a very spoiled child.
He got some
begging
idea in his
for-
head. Now he can't
yeah.
shake it.
Yeah. And this is how I also think that there's sort of, you know, even though this father-child relationship where Merlin is like, he'll do this for him because he sees something, an opportunity for himself. But I think also he's like, okay, I do love you as well. So it's kind of weird that
Right.
there is sort of like, I'll give you this weird thing that you want, even though I shouldn't give it to you because of this love attachment I have for you. That to me was very interesting. But of course, Uther does not know what he's agreeing to. He does not understand anything.
He doesn't ask any questions.
Yeah, and he has no understanding past his lust or whatever it is that he wants at the time, at that moment. So, and that is the reason why he's not the one. And he doesn't have any ability to see past himself.
Whatever impulsive idea he has in his head. This scene made me laugh in a good way, kind of because it's just so raw. Where he's like, "But the river, there's no way to get there." Like, your lust will hold you up, and that line is great.
Yeah.
Okay, but two, this guy doesn't question when he jumps over the cliff on him. He's like, "Okay, let's go." He is like hook, line, and sinker. You want me to jump off a cliff and my lust to hold me up? 10-4, I'm out. I got it. No questions asked. He just goes, man.
Yes, and I believe that's part of one of the themes of faith that keeps coming up in the story. He has this blind faith. And that is also because, Merlin has never really let him down, but he just jumps off of the cliff. And it's really
archetypally that's called a leap of faith. You are correct. Indiana Jones does it in The Last Crusade. Neo has to do it when he jumps. So the leap of faith is a thing. It's just funny to see someone doing it for lust.
Oh yeah, as like
usually for something worthy or believing in yourself. This guy's like, I believe in like lust. I'm out of here, and leaps off the cliff.
Yeah, how much lust is gonna keep you afloat from from a river?
He didn't stumble once across that.
He like completely defied gravity on that. It's so great. The other thing I wanted to mention is that, and which you could see during the scenes where they're trying to bang down the walls of the castle, and I actually want to go back to that for a second. Is that Stonehenge is right on the side, and they show you for a brief second that Stonehenge is there, but just at this point, we have the Duke of Cornwall still goading and tempting. You'll never get in here, and you'll never get a grain.
Yeah, totally.
It's like, oh man, calm down. He's just insane, and just to look, there's this sense of like a little bit of fear that maybe they might get there, but he wants to like die before ever letting anybody get close to Igraine. So there is a sense of protection there. That was really funny to me.
You'll never get Igraine.
This
is where that great music comes in.
Oh yeah,
that like eerie music.
Yes, I love that. And then the ladies' voices. That I tried to do it, but it was like,
yeah, it's like an ooh. It's like this really creepy music. It's really good, and it just immediately makes me know that I'm watching Excalibur. Yes, right when I hear that,
and it influences the idea of that magical concept. Like there's some things going on here that's supernatural. This doesn't happen in the natural world, you know.
Yeah,
Guys
on the
don't.
soundtrack, it's called Merlin's Spell.
Oh, yeah, nice. Yeah. Guys don't float over, bodies of water.
We think we do.
Yeah. One thing I also wanted to mention here is that at this point in time, they've set up this sort of diversion, and I believe Merlin is
Merlin seems to have staged it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he had the army retreat, like break camp and retreat, which is perceived by Cornwell's guys as they're giving up the siege.
Yes.
And Cornwell's like, oh no, they're not. When they ride out, we're going to go after them and we're going to finish them.
Yes.
Which draws him out.
He could have just not done that, but he did go after him, and I think that was part of his own pride, you know. And if we could call, if we're not sure if it's total lust that he has, he does have pride as his sort of Achilles heel in all of this. Like this is sort of what could happen if you're too prideful. You can actually drive yourself out into the middle of some place where you're vulnerable and could get hurt.
Yeah, so I think that might be a better dynamic. He's more prideful, whereas Uther is pure, unadulterated lust impulse.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's so crazy.
And that's a flaw for both warriors.
Yes, a flaw for both. Immediately, 3 crows mysteriously fly up into the air, and Cornwall falls off of his horse and ends up dying. And I thought it was very interesting that at the very same time, they extend his death for pretty much for a long scene there.
Oh yeah.
We have Uther, who is now at the castle, and he looks just like Cornwall, but the young girl that's there, Morgana, can see that he is not her father. That it's actually, so she can see through Merlin's magic. And unfortunately, Igraine does not. She thinks it's her husband the whole time. So, and I was like, oh, maybe she could have guessed it when he called her Igraine.
And even
why you have to be so rough? It's like, I thought you liked this girl.
Well, and even like when he's pretty aggressive about everything.
Oh
with
my
her.
God.
So, like, it's definitely like not a guy who's been hanging out with her for months and months and months or years and years and years. This guy's like hardcore when he goes in there. So, but it is a good scene when, like you said, you see this face and then he takes off the helmet and it's Uther. And I actually love that the young girl sees him for who he is. There's something about that I really love, because she knows the truth. Yeah. And she is treated kind of villainously in this story. Yeah. But she knows the truth. I think it's the truth maybe corrupted her a little bit, put her on the wrong side of things and made her want to become the aggressor of these kinds of scenarios. Yes. But in that moment, she's a girl who knows the truth about what's happening, and her mother does not.
Yes. I love that you mentioned that, because that's part of the themes that are going on here, truth, and we'll get to more evidence of that. But yes, she is so very important to the story, and this moment really means a lot in the story because it drives
she's present
so
for this
much.
Critical scene in Act 1, disappears in Act 2, and then comes back hard in Act 3.
Oh yeah. And so in this scenario, during this time, you don't really put your kids in other rooms, so it was kind of shocking that this little girl was able to watch something,
he was like hanging out, like watching a rated R movie.
Yeah, and so, and even if her real father was there, that this is a common scenario. So this was really interesting to see. Now you have this little girl who's watching this other man take advantage of her mother with magic. So this sets up a wonderful motivation for her character later.
100%.
She takes it a little bit too far, but
Oh yeah.
at least at this point in time, you do feel sympathy for that child and understand.
100%. That's what I'm saying. Like that moment, I was like, man, she sees the truth. Here is this scene of the most powerful illusions with the highest stakes, with huge consequences. And yet this one young girl sees the truth of all of it.
Yeah.
She sees through Merlin's spell. She sees through the disguise. Like there's a lot of deception going on. And she sees right through it. And I love that. You're right. She does kind of turn to the dark side, which they don't really show you why she got that toxic, but we could kind of fill in the blanks.
Where we get the origin story of it right here. The making of a supervillain. So it was very interesting to me. I thought there was something being said here with, we have the fire, we have the lust going on with, this is the scene on the battlefield with Cornwell dying. He's not quite dead yet, but during the strains of his dying period, they're also going back and forth to the intimate moment that is happening in the story. And again, we have fire behind them. So I thought that was sort of a wonderful little way to link the two scenes. And to show you symbolically where all this passion and all of this lust is driving.
Well, what's interesting is, and I don't think we've ever had this conversation, but the sacred fire for male stories is a little different. With men, there seems to be a premise of the ethics of force. So fire is either a constructive building tool or it's a destructive force. So I think in these scenes that you're pointing out, the fire symbolism for the men is destroying. This is destructive.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I love that.
Did you get the impression that Cornwell was feeling this while he was dying?
Oh, maybe. Yes, because he was just
when I watched it. Yeah, I've always read that as, because there's one point he's like, oh, and then he's like, wait a minute. What the I always got a sense that he was feeling this physically, what this guy was doing, because he was using his body. So I always thought, because he seems to be reacting very profoundly to like this overwhelming sensation while he's dying. And I always thought that it was because he was feeling this.
Yeah, yes. And I was,
which also made me think that he knew what was happening as he died.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
And we'll talk about, this is really great, because these are the little things that you kind of like wonder about. And we have this fire symbolism, and we have this character Igraine. And would you say, we're not going to get into the Heron's Labyrinth because I don't think really it's prevalent unless you see something, but Igraine's sacred fire, right? Her sexuality and her being seems to be something that these two guys want.
Well, yeah. So one of the most primal things you could do in terms of sacred fire for female character, in a classic sense, is her beauty and sexuality. And the creative power is her ability to create life. So men will go in a classic primal sense. Men are competing for this right.
Yeah.
They're competing for the right to mate and to have her. And here we have very strong primal depictions of men who are throwing civilized thinking out the window and literally competing like two rams butting heads for her. So there is the primal symbolism of her sacred fire being the creative force of life. And that is what Merlin is banking on. Now, she exits the story. So that's why I wasn't going to get into the Heroine's Labyrinth too deeply. But there is the cult of deception occurring around Morgana right in this scene. And she sees through it, which I think is a very powerful thing, because a lot of heroines are deceived by the cult of deception, as Igraine is deceived But
Yes.
here there's this young child, this feminine character who's young and should be the easiest to deceive of them all. She's the one who sees it. And I think there's something bizarre and powerful about that.
Yeah.
And of course, and I almost wish it played out differently for Morgana, that she became this powerful, good sorceress. but this is the story we have. So I do think there's that element to it. And I also do think there is the sacred fire of Igraine, meaning the ability to create. Her sacred fire is the king. Her offspring is the king, and it's not the king of these two, warlords. This is the noble King Arthur, the good king. The quote unquote good king.
Yes.
So there are those elements there. You thinking about that, I think is on target.
Just the imagery of the fire in the background of these two, it just was really.
Well, the world is burning. Yeah, back there.
Yeah. It's just like, and the thing is that their actions were so self-centered in many of the cases for both of them that they didn't care. They didn't care that the world was burning.
Nope.
And okay, so
yes, great line.
This line, love it.
Yes.
The future has taken root in the present. And especially the way it's filmed, the way he looks into the camera, he turns around and looks into the camera. And it's just such a powerful moment. And I don't know if you felt like this in your life, but there are some moments where you're like, this is going to affect me for the rest of my life. Like this one thing or this one moment, I should savor it or either, remember it very well. And so I did love that. Everything seems to kind of jump 9 months. 9 months later, the queen is pregnant. You made a comment that, hey, if he had only waited.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, he goes through this absolutely insane process to sleep with Igraine through deceptive means. By doing that, he actually had created a tactical diversion.
Yes.
Which ended up destroying his foe. And then he ends up marrying her right after. So it's like, dude, just come up with the tactical diversion, win, and then, maybe marry her.
Yeah.
Everyone wins, and there's none of this. So it seemed like he would have ended up with Igraine anyway. But he couldn't see that far. He wasn't thinking like that.
That is the downfall of Uther. And Merlin shows up and basically lays it all out. Uther, you're not the one. It, really tells him like why he's not the one. No one trusts you. You stole another man's wife. All of the things that are not kingly. He's been doing this whole time. You're not the one to unite the land. You're not the one. Takes the baby, and we get the reveal that it was really him who came that night.
Well, and she suspects. Yeah. In retrospect, Igraine knows something was up that night.
Yes.
She kind of says, a man came to me that night. That's who the father of this child is. And then she puts it together.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why she kind of suspects it's not him is because she was told that her husband had died just about at the same time.
Right. She's like, there's something impossible about what I just experienced.
Yeah. And so that was, her tip off, and rightly so. She goes insane that this, Merlin, the magician, is going to take her child.
Yeah. She's very opposed to this.
Yeah. So you could hear her screaming as he's walking out with the baby, like, go after him, get him back. And, unfortunately, Uther is like kind of kind of stuck because he doesn't want to go against his friend Merlin, but also, that's his child.
Well, and you pointed out earlier in one of the great ironies of all of this, Uther, who's like the most unreasonable, the most unredeemable, is like right about to make a maturity change.
Yes.
Like right now, he's like, you know what? I'm tired of war. I'm going to be the good guy. Merlin's like, what's going on? I'm taking your baby. We're gonna so like he was like right there. He was right on the 1 yard line about to change into a good guy.
Yes, he was going to change, but was it all talk or was it real?
Well, good point.
You know, and also I think at this point, even if he was true, Merlin also brought up the point that he did do all these things that people don't trust him. And so
Right.
without the trust of the people, you've already lost. You know, somebody's already planning on killing you. One of the reasons why they also Merlin also is able to take the babies because he says, "Look, I can protect the baby. You know, you've got enemies. I can protect the baby." And so it was kind of
Strategic.
a simpler decision, except for when Igraine started screaming. I think he kind of felt like he had to at least make the attempt to go follow Merlin. Also, Merlin said that after he did that spell, he was out for 9 months. And so
Yes.
it took a lot out of him just to breathe in the breath of the dragon. And I was like, oh, this is really incredible information about, like, even though it feels like he's connected to the dragon, when he's ever messing around with the spell of making is the main spell that
The spell of making, right.
it really takes a toll from the user, or something is sacrificed. So I thought that was quite
and it's not like a small, like it took 3 days to recover. 9 months. So
9
the amount of time it took for a baby to gestate, he was sleeping.
It's so crazy. So he's walking out of the castle and he sees Morgana, and Morgana sees him, and she's like, are you now the baby's mother and father? And I thought it was very interesting. She asked that question. She knew that he was taking that baby forever. And how did she know? I mean, it's definitely that she's a special being. He also says to her something that comes back later, is like, you have your father's eyes. And I believe that him saying that, he can see her father's eyes in her, possibly because of guilt, of course, for what happened and what his part to play in all of this, but also the revenge of her father.
You're about Cornwall, right?
I'm talking about Morgana.
Right. But her father is Cornwall, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The revenge of Cornwall in her eyes, he can see that.
That's what you're thinking he's alluding to.
Yeah, because he mentions more than once, I can see your father's eyes. And it's like part guilt and also knowledge of what he's done, his part in Cornwall's death, that I feel is kind of mentioned and kind of teased throughout the movie, which I absolutely adore.
I think that's great. Those are great observations.
Pendragon goes out after the baby. He's like, okay, I got to get my baby, but he's alone and he's overcome by usurpers. There he is.
Ambush him.
Yeah, they ambush him, and they get him good. I mean, he's bleeding everywhere, and he's like struggling to get there. The last thing he feels like he can do is make it so that Excalibur is only his. He says, Excalibur belongs to me only, even though he's like hanging on for dear life, and he shoves it right into the stone. And I believe this honestly shocks Merlin.
Yes, he looks like he had never foreseen that.
Yeah. And so he's like, oh boy, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And so he says, okay, the only person who can draw the sword out of the stone will be king. And he looks to the baby and says, you're the one. I think that was a beautiful set, actually a great setup for the rest of the story. We really wanted to get into that and make sure we wanted to tease all that stuff out, because it is the foundation of what happens later. And I want us to take a look at the scenery around here. It is like forest, it's barren, no one cares about it. But years later, it is a flourishing little community of different huts and they have plays going on. There's jousting, just people coming from all over to joust, to be able to be worthy enough to even pull the sword from the
right. No one just walks up and gives this a shot.
Yes.
You have to prove yourself worthy of certain athletic, competitive, the activities of a knight, in order to get the right to attempt to pull out the sword. And
Yes.
so yeah, keep going. I mean, you were right on.
Yeah. And then we have
There's the green.
Yes, the green magic of the dragon. But we have Leondegrance, and he has done everything. He has done the jousting. He's won the jousting. He hustles over to the.
Yeah, he's real intense in this scene. I love it.
Yeah, he's breathing hard. He's just fought everybody and won. He's
like into this, man.
Yes. I think I'm the one. And he does a little speech before he has the right blood, and he has bravery. He tries to get that sword, and it is a failure. And that happens to mostly everyone who attempts it. Arthur is a young man. He's a squire. He's a squire at this point. So he has not gotten to the place in which he can even compete. He's actually
he hasn't earned the right to do that.
Yeah. So he is actually the squire of his stepbrother, and his name is Kay.
Yeah, and you get the idea that he's not a great knight. He looks very average.
No, he wasn't gonna win or anything, but he's just starting his career. But it's so interesting because at some point his father, Sir Hector, is telling both of the boys what they should be as their station. And so one thing he says to Kay is, be brave, honest, and merciful as a knight should be. And I thought that was really a great setup for what is expected of knights at this point in time. They're supposed to be
chivalrous.
Yes, upstanding citizens in every way, but also just brave, honest, and merciful. And then he tells Arthur that he should be modest and true, which is another way of saying truthful, right? And so then we have this theme of truthful. The truth coming back to the story. This was a really great thing. Now, there was a theory out there that Kay's sword being stolen is sort of a ruse that Merlin does to kind of draw Arthur away. So that's a theory. That's
a conspiracy theory.
Yes, and so he goes to the stone and he says, "Okay, well, I need a sword." He grabs it. Now, I thought there was something interesting that happened just before he gets to the stone. He goes to a place where they're actually making swords, and he sees a couple of swords, and he reaches to almost like he was going to steal one, and he's like, "No, I better not."
Yes, he was tempted to steal the sword to solve his problem.
Yes, temptation. And I was like, oh no. He chose the better way. And another situation comes up when he draws the sword. Kay comes along. Sir Hector also comes as well, and he says, "Did you pull the sword from the stone, Kay?" And he was just about to, he said yes, and then he said no.
He lies for a second, very half-heartedly. He kind of gives up on it right away.
Yeah, and it was really kind of interesting because I thought, hey, this is Kay being truthful. This was him choosing truth over the lie, and that he was gonna accept. He would have been worthy because he is a knight, or at least training to be a knight.
Right.
And we have this guy who's just a squire. He goes from squire to all of a sudden king in seconds. No. So a lot of
That's
people.
Not the order of things.
No. But then there are people out there who believe in the magic. And they're like, no. Let the boy, do this. And so prior to this, what I'm mentioning now is that the father kind of gets scared a little bit. He says, "Wait a minute, just put it back."
Yeah, put it back. What'd you do, son?
Okay, let's pretend this didn't happen and put it back.
That's so funny because that's such a parental reaction too.
Yeah,
just put it back. What are you thinking?
What are you thinking? That's like the sword, And so people notice, something just happened. We've got Urians who's like, okay, wait a minute. Whoa, 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 whoa. Let's back this up. You can't be pulling out the sword. I'm a knight. I'm the one who should be, up for this, I
Right.
earned the right. He tries to pull it and it doesn't work. And so then easily Arthur and I love the move. He just like, and it's so incredible, that moment, because at that point, mostly everybody kneels and they're like, okay, you're the king now. I just love that because there are people who are not down for this at all.
Nope.
You can't just do that. We've set up some rules, and we expect you to follow them,
Right.
So I thought that was really cool, that not only was it not allowed that anybody could just pull the sword, that you had to be a knight and you had to be
Right.
a certain bloodline that people knew about. You had the athleticism to bring it in, which of course Arthur does have, which he proves later on, but it's not known to anybody at this
Yeah, he's
point.
not accomplished.
Yeah. So he hasn't gone through the normal channels that he's supposed to get to this point. Of course, Merlin just shows up and
Yeah, he just kind of wanders out of the woods.
yeah, he's just like, here I am. And it kind of tempts Arthur away from the crowd, and they go to have this conversation, which you
Well, the
feel at
crowd
this.
is like devolving into factions, right?
Yes.
Pro Arthur and anti Arthur.
Yes, and that's kind of scary, because you're just sort of like, okay, well, are they going to war right now while they're, Merlin is just sleeping on a branch? And this movie slows down. It stops. It encapsulates you inside of this nature exploratorium, if you will.
Well, in the hero's journey, it's called the Sacred Grove, which is usually a forested area, like a glade, that has healing properties often, and it's where the hero withdraws sometimes to learn. Luke Dagobah is the Sacred Grove in Empire Strikes Back. So this is like the Sacred Grove right here.
Oh, nice. And so I thought that this was very interesting, because this is where Merlin is trying to give him a lesson on the connection between himself and the land.
Yes.
And this is very important for him to remember. At some point, he forgets.
Oh, yeah.
And so
and this was also the lesson that Uther was unable to learn, right?
Yes. And so this really, cements and drives home. And I'm not sure if everyone got that when they were watching this. It is about this connection between the land and the people, the king in particular, and his effect on what he can do with the land. Just by him thriving, that the land thrives.
And he does say that. He's like, when you are when you are corrupt, the land will suffer. When you're prosperous, so will your people be. And what is also interesting is this isn't just a random legend. This is the Arthurian legend. They never refer to Britain. It's always just the land,
Yeah. I love that too. And one other thing is that in the morning, and I think we talked about it just briefly, Arthur is swinging around the Excalibur, and you feel like, oh, he's really getting into this and having fun with it. This is a mythical, sword. You might want to be very careful. He's like, oh, I get it. This is, part of the dragon, and two. And so Merlin is really excited, because now we have someone who not only is learning from him, wants to know more, has questions about what's next. And so I think Merlin is really like taken to him in a special way. Their relationship is beginning to grow, and it sets the precedence for later on when they're more connected. And I feel like as mentor to mentee, or father son almost.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Yeah, he's like, oh, you do learn fast.
Yeah. And all of his weird, like eccentric moments is just packed in these scenes.
Dream.
Yeah. And it's so good because like for myself, when I see this, I laugh and I smile. I mean, we're dealing with like heavy concepts of like, battles and things like that. We can smile too, and we can laugh too, and he is having fun with it in a weird way, but also teaching. He's also teaching. Yeah, so now Leondegrance's castle is under full attack. I love this scene. Okay.
Yes.
It's so good. Arthur has come out of his secluded little garden and has now,
The Sacred Grove.
has moved over to where people are waiting for him. Like, what do we do next? And he's like, he gets the urging from, Merlin, go, go talk to them, tell them, show them. And he actually takes to it very well. And leads the battle to Leondegrance, and it is an absolute spectacle.
Right, this is where we get George Orff's Carmina Burana for the first time, because he's like, we're gonna go. He's like, what should we do, King? Leondegrance, the one great knight who's loyal to you. His castle's under siege. What should we do? He's like, we go defend him. And he's like, yes. And everyone's inspired by this order because he's gonna go come to the aid of Leondegrance at this hour of need, which is very heroic.
Yeah.
And the music is up to that task.
Oh yeah, it is. And it's sort of like, he's fighting for us. This is our new king, but he's about to fight for us. And it's incredible. We have our first look at Guinevere. And Guinevere, when she sees Arthur, oh my goodness, we could just get a napkin or something and just go like this. Okay, girl, let's clean you up. She's drooling and just like, oh my God, who is that?
Yeah, she has a very strong attraction reflex.
Oh, yeah. It's so good. The way you see her lust for Arthur and how she's attracted to a certain type, right? Like a lot like Dad, Leondegrance is like fighting like a beast. He's holding them off. He's just like incredible. And then he's doing this incredible job. She's even in the battle. She's got like a little shield up, and he comes in and he's like,
yeah, he's very energetic and valiant. He's a good knight.
Yeah. So when she sees Arthur and he's got the same kind of bravado, just jumps right into the battle. He's like fighting. He's getting cuts and bruises. He doesn't care. He just does this. Then he does this incredible thing where he hears Urians barking orders to everyone, and he jumps on top, jumps from right off the castle onto Urians, and it's like glorious. And she's like, "Oh my God, what a man!" It's great.
Yeah.
And this was an incredible battle. It looked fantastic.
It did.
And I thought this was one of the more realistic.
Yeah, pure medieval brute force against brute force.
It's an ugly scene, but it's realistic, and they had these small corridors people were fighting in. It was uncomfortable. There's clashing sounds of armor getting brutalized, and also people, they really emphasize any of those areas where you had openings, that's a possible place for you to get stabbed.
Right.
And so so those vulnerable areas. So I thought that this scene also set that up really well, which plays into
a role later.
Yeah. And so
I love this scene.
Isn't it great?
Yes, love it. Because this guy was, he wasn't just opposed to Arthur. He was like vehemently opposed. He's like, absolutely not. So and he came across as rather energetic and aggressive too. Like, to the task of Leondegrance. Like he could match them. And so as this scene played out, I was kind of on the edge of my, even though I've seen this a million times, it always feels like this guy won't go with Arthur. Like, this is the guy that's not going to go with him.
Yeah.
But of course, you could, want to summarize kind of the chain of events here.
Well, I mean, literally a knife or a sword to his throat.
Well, he's knocked off his horse.
Yeah.
And he, like you said, he lands into the river, and he's vulnerable. So the king's got him.
He's got him. He could get his head chopped off at this point. But
and and I forgot this knight's name. What was this knight's name? Sir
Urian.
Yeah. He's very defiant in this compromised position. He's not like, I'm sorry, sir. He's like, screw you. Like, I'm not afraid of you. Bring it on. Come at me, bro. So he's very defiant in this.
Yes. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting was he has this incredible disbelief. He's sort of one of the disbelievers. He just doesn't believe in, no matter the proof. He's got sure, you have the sword, that means nothing. You are not a knight, and you have to be a knight in order to be a king, and you have no honor. And he's like, okay, there's a moment in which there's a knowledge that, hey, Urians is telling the truth here. He's got a point.
He's got convictions,
And then we have this scene where he says, here, take Excalibur.
And he just hands it to him. It's
so me right now.
Yeah, he goes, you're right. So what's interesting, Urians, to your point, has a good point, right? There's a case to be made against Arthur. He makes it, and he stands by it passionately. So he's got conviction.
Yes.
And here, Arthur's got him dead to rights. He's defiant. He refuses to relent. He's like, I stand by my position. I'm willing to die. He goes, you're not a knight. Arthur recognizes the validity to at least the argument, for argument's sake. He goes, you're right. I'm not a knight. And without even thinking twice, hands him Excalibur, the greatest sword. Just hands it to him and then drops to his knees and puts himself in the most vulnerable position possible. And I love this actor. He can't believe it. He's like, what's wrong with you? And because of the purity of the moment, because of the abject, blind trust.
Yes.
He can't bring himself to slay the child king that he doesn't believe in. He couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best moments of the movie. I love it every time. Because not only does he balk at the moment that it matters, he just gushes with sincerity and loyalty toward this new king of his. And I freaking love it.
What I also adore, there's a couple of things happening here, because it's kind of strategically helping. The reason why he goes at Urians in particular is that he knows he needs Urians. He needs a leader, someone who can bark orders at an army as good as he can. So it's strategic, but it's also like, I don't want to just slay this guy. I'm realizing something valuable is here. This is something Uther could not do. Uther would not be able to kill that guy.
Uther would take his head off.
Yeah. So he is able to ascertain that value in people and also have trust in that value, that he's not going, this is incredible faith to actually turn things, have the advantage and actually give your sword to your enemy and say, I leave your fate in my hands.
Well, and it's not even totally reckless. Like, he won. He got Urians. He got him. He kind of got the best of them, and then just gave up that advantage. So it's a very unusual and powerful gesture in this warrior ethos, in the warrior code. And you get it. You get why Urians is like,
Oh
I
man,
don't
you're
know
the
if I could
man.
kill this guy. I don't know if I
Yeah,
could do
yeah,
it.
yeah. You're amazing.
Yeah, wow, yeah, totally.
Well, and
And
also
also
too, you
he's
see that look on his face when he has Excalibur, and he's like, "I could actually keep this thing."
oh,
he
he's totally
looked like
like
for a second, he's like, "Oh, I've been wanting this for a long time."
100%. He's like, oh my God. He's like, dude, I've got everything I want. Arthur's sitting there completely. And not only did he give him the sword, if you look at this just from a tactical overview,
Yeah,
handing your enemy the sword and saying, I trust you is one thing. He's
kneeling.
also empowering Urians
Yeah.
to make him a knight, which then nullifies Urian's argument.
Yes.
So he's giving him this authority
Yeah.
to make him the king.
Yeah.
So it's not just that you put yourself in a vulnerable position. You do that, you empower your enemy to destroy you, but you're also granting him the authority to destroy his own argument.
Yeah.
And Urians decides it's worth giving up that argument for this guy. It's worth it. This is a bad. I don't even believe in my own argument. Just like magic, like I've given up on this. Everyone is shocked by this.
Yeah,
Everyone.
well, Merlin is shocked.
Merlin,
Right?
yeah, Merlin's like,
he never
I didn't.
about this.
Yes, I love it. I absolutely love it. So this is what I'm saying. All the hokiness or all the flaws in this movie, it delivers a scene like this, and I'll watch it a million times, and that scene will never get old.
Oh,
I will always love that scene.
Oh goodness, and then there are many more. There are many more. That's
Many more. That's
crazy.
Correct.
That's the crazy part about it. And so, yeah, I loved Merlin's reaction to that, because you see the fear on his face, like, oh snap, all of this work is going to be for naught if Urians does the pretty obvious thing.
If he uthers him.
Yeah. And so, and it was totally within his rights, and there were people in the background like, "You take the sword for yourself."
Totally. Like the little devil and the little angel on your shoulders.
Yeah, it was great. When it turned around, Merlin is like, he really felt like he had even more faith in Arthur, that he was the one.
He's the king. This is the king now. Yeah.
This is outside of Merlin's control at this point. He has graduated to like the next level of becoming the one, or the prophecy, the one of the prophecy.
Well, and I think the audience feels the same way, because even when you see a squire pull the sword, you can be like, well, that would be kind of a tough sell.
Yeah,
like we're going to form a government around this guy. Like, serious? So like you can certainly sympathize with Urians and the anti-Arthur party, So and it looked kind of awkward. While these two are arguing, Arthur runs off into the woods like a scared little boy. So, there's definitely doubt on the part of the audience whether the actor, whether the show could deliver him as a king. And then he comes in to relieve Leondegrance from his siege, which is heroic. And now you're like, okay, this is a good move. Like, that is a good move. But everyone in the audience who saw that scene is like, Arthur's the king. Like, we're sold now. All of us are sold. Merlin was sold. Retro Nerd Girl was sold. I was sold.
And Urian is like, he like gives him a passionate kiss on the hand. Okay. I was like, wow, he's really into this.
It's such a reversal from a hostile adversary to a utterly loyal like knight.
Yeah.
It's such a reversal that it's that much more rewarding to observe.
And I think
this guy wouldn't act like that for just no reason. He's not a coward. He's not giving up. He's not afraid of Arthur. He's doing out of pure, unadulterated loyalty to the belief that this is the king. So I love it.
He believes. He's now a believer. Then we get this really interesting scene with Guinevere, and I think this scene gets overlooked quite a bit, because Guinevere, in the history books and maybe some other content, she is definitely looks as an adulterer, but she is a healer at the same time. At least in this story, she mends her father on occasion. She mends up Arthur. This is where they kind of kindle a relationship, or she becomes the vessel of healing later on. I think that's one of the things that she is able to do. She has the power of healing, of being able to heal. And especially the last scene that she is in the movie, I believe she did kind of do a little bit of healing for Arthur. And we can get to that later. But I feel like
as the nun.
Yes, and I feel like that is something that we often people don't kind of see about her as a character.
That's great. You're totally right. I don't think I was thinking of it in terms of a persistent theme, but you're right. It's all throughout.
Yeah. She even has like some cakes that she gives Arthur that makes him fall in love with her.
She's being tricky.
Yeah, but it was supposed to, have some healing properties to help him feel better, which I thought was very interesting. Once he takes a bite, Merlin is like, "It's too late."
Feminine devilry.
Yes, there is that conversation at the party where it's clear that Arthur has feelings for Guinevere, and Merlin is trying to warn him ahead of time, like, "Hey, you will be betrayed by a close friend." And he just doesn't pay attention. He's like, "Oh, so Guinevere is going to end up with me." That's all he can think of.
It's like Jim Carrey. Do I have a chance? 1 in a million. So you're saying I've got a chance?
Yeah.
That's all he hears, is that there's still a path for him.
Yeah, he doesn't care how it ends up either. I mean, it's in there, like, because he mentions it later, but he didn't process it in that way. It was more like, "Oh yeah, this is great. I'm in love, and remember this party that they're having." All of the guys are picking her up and just passing her off to the next guy.
Yeah.
And,
go ahead.
You see all of like the future stars of today, like all of the big, like Liam Neeson,
Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, so
Qui-Gon and Jean-Luc Picard are there.
Yeah, come on.
Well, what's interesting is if you listen to the music is a variation of Igrain's dance music.
Ooh.
That ba 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 ba. It's a variation of that exact theme. And I think this is a little reminiscent of Uther, because here now you have Arthur kind of running through a red light.
Yeah.
Now, it's not for pure lust. You get a sense that he is interested in her as a wife with a relationship. Like, so it does seem to be a couple notches up the ladder there, but it is still, he's running a red light.
Yeah. Running that red light.
A party with a dance. What's that?
I'm like, yes, running that red light.
Yeah, us guys will run some red lights. So, but it's Arthur's turn now, man, and so he does, and this does. What's funny is Uther runs the red light, and you're like, "Oh, this he's not even slowing down. He's he's gonna blow through that red light without even thinking twice." Arthur, you get a sense that like this seemed to be a little bit less of a grievance or an error or a sin.
Yeah.
And yet, as you watch this movie, the conflict that is created from this feels so much worse than anything Uther did. This seems to be like the snowballing problem that causes so much strife, so much grief, and devastates so many knights of the Round Table, including Arthur himself. So it does seem to be a smaller slight with much greater consequences. It's very unusual.
Yeah. At this point in time, she's a very sweet girl. There's no red flag. Yeah, and I think she does kind of maintain that throughout the story. It's just they don't make it that she's a bad person or manipulative or anything. It just
agreed.
So
in fact, I think it's a mostly favorable portrayal of her.
I think so.
I think the way the movie portrays Guinevere is that she was destined for Lancelot. And so her acting on that and Lancelot acting on that in that forest scene, the way the movie suggests that this was inevitable, that this is what was supposed to happen. And it was Arthur's interference with this destiny that has caused all the problems. So that was the impression I got. So I didn't look at Guinevere like, oh, you just couldn't control yourself.
Yeah.
So like, I wasn't as hard. In fact, I wasn't harsh on Guinevere or Lancelot.
All those watching this recording, this is there was no glitch in the matrix. We did have a different day to schedule the rest of this recording, so just so that way you know. Some time has passed. It's I would say about maybe a decade, because now he's no longer a boy. Arthur is now a man, but he
Correct.
is still trying to unite all the lands. Has not done that just quite yet. His army is having a hard time passing this one guy, Sir Lancelot, who is
On a bridge, right?
on a bridge and will not let anyone pass. Now, later on, we find out that they could all take the longer route around this path. But it is all about principle, that many men have faced this guy and they have failed. And now King Arthur is like, look, I've got to do this myself, which I love the fact that he's doing that. But now his tone is a lot different. He's embodying a lot of his father's traits, the Uther Pendragon, where he's more boisterous and more demanding. He finds Merlin at a creek, and Merlin is trying to find a very slippery silver fish, and very interesting that it's a silver fish. But at the same time, when Arthur approaches, he's got this like really like what this kind of angry kind of tone with him, and I'm like, and I was like, wow, this is really different from his tone earlier, where he was more softer and he was friendly and wanted to learn, and now he's acting more like a king, but not the good one that we wanted him to be. He's acting more like Uther. At this whole thing with Merlin, a lot of people have said this is a very silly scene, with him falling into the creek and making jokes. His voice is all weird, and honestly, this to me is a teaching lesson for Arthur, and that he's trying to offer to him. And one thing he says is that there's always something or someone more clever than yourself.
That's right.
And that was part of the lesson, I believe, in humility. And they even mention humility, but I think they have a different understanding of what humility is at that point. But it was, and this is the lesson that Arthur eventually learns through this entire experience, as he rushes over to battle this man that is sort of a noble knight, and he is he's looking in search for a king to serve, but he has not found one that's worthy enough.
Right, and all of this is loaded with warrior ethos. So you know what I'm saying? So
yes,
like you could think of Uther as the dark side of the warrior ethos. Ego driven, rash, reckless, foolish, quick to action without any thought. That's the negative side of the warrior ethos. And you're right, Arthur does start to embody some of that. It is part of the warrior ethos that you don't cower or shrink from the challenge, that you go confront this challenge because it's in front of you. So it's not all bad, but you're right. I think the tone overall suggests that Arthur is a little caught up in this role at the moment, and perhaps not thinking clearly, which manifests itself in the way he handles this confrontation with Lancelot.
Yes.
He ends up not making some good decisions. And I was also going to say, you did mention that the scene had some awkwardness to it, with the way, and Merlin does fall into the river in kind of a funny way. It looks like a fake fall, like whoa,
whoa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It was on purpose.
But the idea of him acting quirky, I didn't have a problem with. A lot of mentors adopt a kind of a silly persona, like Yoda did it in Empire Strikes Back. Gandalf does it. He's the old grandpa who likes, and then all of a sudden he's like taking on a Balrog. So a lot of these mentor characters have a humbling demeanor, like a humbling or trickster persona. And I think that that's true of Merlin. So I wasn't bothered by it as much, but I'll agree that the fall may not have looked as natural as I would have liked.
I really think he was trying to say in that moment, you know, like, hey, he's this incredibly powerful sorcerer, and yet he can't catch a simple fish. And the fish has got him off balance, right? And throws him into, you know, into a tailspin. He doesn't know what he's doing, and he ends up in the creek. And it's just really that subtle writing that I really appreciate. And I know a lot of people don't see that. When they see that scene, I was like, oh, this is one of the reasons why, you know, Merlin is so weird. But I think it's one of the reasons why this is brilliant. Doing sort of doing a teaching moment for author, and then of course it takes more drastic things to really actually get through to author, because he's been blinded by the rage and the weariness of battle, and which he needed to have in order to get to this point in his, you know, efforts to unite the land. So I think, you know, he doesn't just become king and then you know, is suddenly the land is completely united, which I love. It takes some time, and he has to go through the trials and the tribulations to become king finally.
Well, you know, there is something to being a leader of men. You know, I encounter it in many books. I've studied Belisarius. I'm a big fan of Belisarius. He's a Byzantine general. The armies back in those days, you know, talk about the warrior ethos. You know, it wasn't a bureaucratic position necessarily. And if you were there only because of birthright, well, does that mean that because you're gonna ask men to risk their lives, like, you know, march into this line, and we might get surrounded. A man's going to ask himself, like, am I going to listen to this guy, or screw this? I ain't doing that. Like, you're nuts. I'm not, you know, I don't care. Or you're quick to retreat. And the king says, don't retreat. And you're going to continue and maybe die by following this order. So there's a certain kind of man that's giving these orders in the medieval era. And the men following him ask themselves constantly, am I going to follow an order that's going to get me killed? So, you know, you have to have that quality. So Arthur earning that through leading by example, like, I will face the terror that I will, you know, that's okay with me too. So I like that they do take their time to show that, you know, he got the men's support because he drew the sword.
Yes.
You know, there's the prophecy side to why men are following him, but now he's got to earn their respect and obedience on the battlefield. And the real way to do that is through being the kind of guy that when you give an order that men follow you even to
so. Now just as a sort of a preface to this too, and it speaks to his bravery. You know, everybody was saying, no, we can't let you go fight this guy. Maybe he was a little rash in doing it, but he wanted to be the leader in that situation.
Right.
And maybe it was for the wrong cause. And that was also the biggest problem. But you have to give him a lot of points for bravery, for going up against this guy that everybody's been having trouble with. You know, he hasn't killed anybody. They're just jousting, and he's really good at it.
Right. Well, and it's also a way of, you know, you guys all risked yourselves for us crossing this bridge. You know, I'm not above it either. You know, so there is a justification for why he would do it that's not all bad. But again, the tone of all of this is that he is a little misguided in this dude.
Well, they do joust, and the joust turns deadly because he begins to attack Sir Lancelot, who beat him fairly.
Right.
And this turns into a nasty fight. And this fight is so visceral and just brutal. I mean, every little impact. Felt like it was so incredible. And then you hear the clanks like
that was good.
They were just like, oh my God, I felt every single one of those things. And there was an emphasis again, and I mentioned it before, on getting those areas, exposed areas. Where you know, just poking at those areas can really give you an advantage. This was pretty well done, I believe. If you're probably a fight expert, you might have a problem with it, but for the layman, it was it was riveting. It was very
Yeah.
riveting. So they
And it still
battle.
captured the violence of combat. I think that's what Excalibur fights
Yes.
do so well, regardless of the accuracy or the legitimacy of the combat style. It brings brutality right there into your living room, and you feel it, you hear it. Excalibur just excels at that.
Yes, yeah, the brutality is a great term to name this. They end up in this sort of area, like it's like a ravine, I guess you would call it. Another one of these like interesting places. And there's like a waterfall, and then there's a lake, and lots of rocks, and they're battling. Sir Lancelot has the advantage. At one point, King Arthur is laying down on the rocks, and he's he's pretty much defeated, and he grabs Excalibur and calls upon its power to defeat his enemy. And I was like, ooh, I remember seeing that for the first time, and just being in awe that you could do that you could call upon the Excalibur, and it could serve you in that way. And he comes out with a huge blow and really gets Sir Lancelot, but at the same time, he breaks Excalibur.
Right, which is a consequence, which, I'm a big fan of showing consequences, right?
Yes.
Good or bad.
Yes.
And this is obviously a consequence, perhaps misusing the sword, right? Against a superior knight. And to illustrate your point, King Arthur is behaving a little negative. There's a little bit of a dark side here that's kind of being shown.
Yes.
To contrast Arthur in his off balance, darker warrior ethos, you have a perfect knight.
A perfect knight, yes.
Most ethical, virtuous knight on the other side of this. So it's a great contrast, right? Secondly, Arthur, to show you where his mind is, perceives that Lancelot is simply boasting. So he thinks Lancelot is being egotistical. Yes. And what that really is showing, to your point, is that he's projecting onto Lancelot his own failing at that time.
Yes.
That's what he's doing, right?
Yes, yeah.
So
he even uses the word "you lack humility." He actually says that to Lancelot. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And that's just reflected back at himself. So he fights this virtuous knight, and we find out through listening, and the actor delivers this.
Oh, yes.
So how do you come across, how do you sell to the audience that you're not a braggart warrior, chest beater? And he says it. He's like, he says, sorry, I am not boasting. This is a curse. And you sense the actor delivers this in a way that makes you go, oh, he's doomed to defeat everybody.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So that creates in me a special reaction. And this is where Excalibur also excels so much, in my opinion.
Yes.
It takes you from the layer of spectacle that the movie also delivers, but it goes that one layer deeper, like a fable. You're facing an archetypal something that has a rule base to it, right? The knight that can't lose. Yes. And when you encounter these in stories, even a child can respond to it. And so you get this scenario that has, you have to see how it ends. How is the king with Excalibur going to face the knight that can't lose?
Yeah, is he good enough?
And we find out that the knight who can't lose wins because he's the knight that can't lose. And Arthur hacks this riddle by calling on Excalibur and breaks it and defeats the knight. And Lancelot, immediately submits himself. I can't believe it. I have never lost. You're the guy. I thank you so much for defeating me. And you captured a great shot there. Arthur is aware that he really did not earn this.
Yeah.
And he broke Excalibur.
Well, I absolutely love this part because of his immediate understanding of the lesson, right? Pride and rage, he says, is what broke Excalibur.
Right, the Uther, the dark side of the warrior ethos, and I think Merlin seems to be very impressed with how quickly Arthur recognizes his error, and concedes.
Yeah, this is something that again we talked about. Uther could not do this, it was interesting that he mentions Excalibur was not meant to serve the vanity of one man.
Correct.
And it was meant to unite the land. It wasn't meant for that. So I thought that was so important to just the lore and the energy of this film, the epicness of like this man, also Arthur, is not allowed to be a vain person or somebody who is worried about his own ego. He has to be of the people. He has aligned with the purpose of Excalibur. If not, it breaks again. If not, he's not worthy to be king. He's not worthy to hold Excalibur.
Also distinguishes him from Uther. Although he might be straying on the range, Uther does not learn from his mistakes.
Yes.
Arthur does. And so that does distinguish him as, more worthy. And by the way, the scene resolves itself by treating him as a worthy holder of the sword.
Yes. The wondrous Lady of the Lake, she returns it to him, and he grabs it.
And the sword is made whole again.
It's I mean, they have like 50 swords down there in the lake. She's like, okay, no, just take this one. And it was beautiful because you have all the wonderful music, and Merlin's like, go get it. And there she is, the Lady of the Lake, with all that beautiful music. I love this moment. It really just does feel otherworldly and magical. You get all that stuff that you really, I love it to see in movies. He's shocked to have it again. At this time, he's going to handle things in the proper way. He's going to be worthy of the sword. It's not just to be worthy of being king, but worthy to wield Excalibur.
In Heroes, yeah, it's awesome. In Heroes Journey Stories, which I do believe these stories are rooted in hunter warrior storyline. The ethics of force, and worthiness are core elements of it, and Excalibur just loads up on it, and that's why it's so satisfying, because the messages and the themes are congruent with the type of story being told, and we're all rewarded as viewers, I think, when these moments happen.
Absolutely, and I think you can't have. I think this is the juicy details a lot of people overlook. They're getting it, but they don't see it always. It's more like action, special effects, all the showy things that people see, but the little details of the lessons being learned and characters growing and developing, it's just beautifully done in this movie. I'm in awe of, like, every time I see this movie, I learn something new about the details. So he's like, I got the sword again.
Man, it's great. And you see that's the green light? Yes. The green magic light.
The magic, the dragon's magic within the Excalibur, just wonderful.
I love it.
Now we have this really epic scene here where it's been a few years later. I'm not exactly sure how long, and I think maybe if there's a critique of this, would be like just to give us some years to tell us, like, 10 years later, 5 years later. Because we understand that time has passed, but we don't understand how much. And so we're going to give it take maybe another 10 years, maybe. This is the beginning of the fellowship, right? Where these guys are coming together and say, remember this day. This is the day we were united. Merlin is saying, remember this moment.
I was there with the king.
Yeah. Oh, such a great
as a kid, I fell in love with that dialogue.
Yeah, so good.
You guys will remember this night. You could say I was there with the king, and there's something so brotherly and the warrior bonding, and it's like I was there with the king that day. What a great day that would be to remember, right?
Yes.
So I loved it even as a little boy. I fell in love with that dialogue because, and it always made me search for moments to include a line like that in my own writing. You have to be sparing, but you have to pick that moment to say this is the moment you want to reflect on. And Merlin's aware of it, and of course the whole scene is fantastic.
Yes, and one of the things he says about that, which I thought was really great. And he says, "Remember this moment, for it is the doom of men that they forget." And so I was like,
Correct.
"Oh God, you just so many like amazing things." So yeah, and the way it's done is very dramatically because he leaves the scene, and the way he kind of flamboyantly does so, it's just great. And so
Yeah.
this
Yep.
is the modeling basically of King Arthur's new society he's going to build
Correct.
within his. He's going to have a castle. He's going to have gold and silver all over the place, and he's describing this to all of the men, and they're just loving it. And he says that I'm going to have a round table.
Well, yeah,
I love the way he says a round table.
yeah, it's kind of funny watching it because it it's hard to deliver those lines because you have to make it look like you are thinking of this for the first time.
Yes.
But the concept was, a long table, there's two heads. So whoever
Yes.
sits at the head would have a status above the other guests.
Yeah.
And the round table, there is no head of the table. So everyone is equal at the round table. And I love that.
Yes, it's so wonderful. So yeah, I love that. And it's a beautiful moment, and it's a wonderfully done with great music and celebration. I always love that this scene because finally we get a celebration for King Arthur and the boys.
Yeah, there's kind of a payoff, right? We've gone on
Yeah.
this journey with them, and Arthur, we saw him as a squire. We saw the entire buildup of Uther and how all this got. And then here's the fulfilling of the prophecy. He has to do something to maintain this. You don't just win you don't just win the prophecy and that's the end of it. You got to become the leader of men, the guy who can lead men into battle. You have to know the ethics of force. You have to earn these moments. And he also has this egalitarian sense of knighthood, that I am like you at this table.
Yes. I mean, he sets also the precedence of what a knight should be, and those are very important values. It's really great because I mean, if I were doing sort of a if I were going to remake this, I wouldn't even call it Excalibur. I would if I were going to remake a movie with this kind of lineage, I would definitely at this point end the movie and have a part 2 with the rest of the movie because it's really a lot to handle, and like just expand upon the little details here and there because this is really like incredible storytelling. And
you could do like a mini series, a 4-part mini series where you do each of these acts for 1 hour. So it'd be a 4, like you said, you flesh in and by naming each one, you would also say 4 years later, or or put a date on it if you want.
Yeah, put a date on it or something that will give you an indication how much time has passed, or maybe even fill in those empty days or empty time slots with content, like like a little montage of like them going into battle and then defeating all of their enemies.
Yeah, you could that would work too. A montage.
And anything to help us get even more storytelling in this incredible movie. So then we come to this part where Sir Lancelot is escorting Guinevere to her wedding. First it seems really quite innocent. I think he sees her for the first time and he's like in awe of her. And she's like, and she gives him like a weird look. It's not really concise whether she's smitten or anything, but she's
well, it could be a guarded response.
Yeah.
I know, because some women, when there's an attraction reflex, they immediately get guarded, or an awareness that this guy's got her number.
Yes, something's
that could be reason to be guarded as well.
Yeah, something's afoot, and so she's trying to make the best of it, and she. On the way there to the wedding, some girls are giggling and saying, and looking at Sir Lancelot and saying, "Oh, look at that guy! He's cute." And she decides, "Hey, look, the girls want me to, find out, if you're available, or she's trying to get the details."
High school,
she's trying to get the details. Yeah, she's like, "Okay, what's going on with you?" The girls want to know.
Alice from accounting is single.
Yeah. At least she's trying to be like. She's trying to hook him up with somebody, but He is very, very straightforward about the fact that he is in love with her. No bones about it. No kidding around. No, no soft words about it.
Which is
I'm in
in
love
line
with
with
you.
his character. He's
Yeah,
honest.
yeah,
He cannot
yeah.
lie.
Truth, truth.
Right.
Right. And which
Right.
we talked about before. And that truth, like, is so shocking to her. And she pulls back and she's like mortified, but as anybody would be who is about to get married, so that's something you just don't spring on the bride, like right before she's about to get married, and you're the best friend of the man that she's marrying. Ooh,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
really,
all bets are off at that point.
it's really, yeah, it's a really tough situation. He doesn't make it any easier. What do you feel about that in particular? Do you think it would have been wise for Sir Lancelot to play it a little coyer, or just like go along with like her arrangement, or was it better for him to tell the truth?
Well, I think it's better to tell it. This reminds me of like the foot massage conversation in Pulp Fiction. He's like, where he's like, a foot massage doesn't mean anything. He's like, I'm saying it does. So what's happening here is, even though she is making an overture to him on behalf of these other maidens, there's
Yeah.
still a flirtation going on back and forth. So it's like, I know what a foot massage is, right? Like, so I feel like he's basically saying, for me to engage in this, I would still be flirting with you. My desire for you would be, escalating. So I think it's in character for him to be like, I'm cutting this off at the butt. I'm not even going to engage with this. I'm not even going to allow this any breathing room or anything like that. So I think it's in line with his character to just shut it down immediately, and to be blunt, and to force her to kind of confront the reality of this as well, which she does to some extent.
I do like your explanation of this, because it could be a very tricky thing for people to see somebody be so blunt and so truthful in such a sticky situation.
What did you think about it? Like, what was your sense of it?
I didn't know. I was like, that's a new one. I was like, oh my goodness, wow, he doesn't hide anything. Or we've gotten enough clues already that something is going to happen.
Well, and she becomes more and more aware that she's like desires him, and and to a point where she's unable to hide it as well. Like, she's unable to mask it.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get to that. My goodness. But yeah, it was a little shocking to me. I didn't expect a character to do that. I thought maybe they would kind of fall in love somehow along the way.
But that's why he's nipping this in the bud now. Like, he's just not going to let any. Like I said, it's the foot massage thing where you're pretending that nothing's happening, but something is happening.
Yes.
And he's like, nope, not even gonna. If I let this go, then we'll get the scenario you're talking about, which is where it does start to develop and it does progress, even if they're pretending it's not, right? So he's like, nope, it's over. Like, I want you, I desire you, and so I can't even have this discussion. I'd be betraying my king.
Wow. Yes, I never saw it in that point of view. Thank you, Doug. Your explanation is so great. And of course, we have this incredible, iconic wedding that
totally.
If you see this picture, you know what movie it is. There's no question about it. It's Excalibur.
These guys are like, they're not in their tuxes. No, they're not in their livery. They're like in full plate armor at the wedding. Like, I love it.
Shiny as can be, shiny as as disco balls, and they're just like gleaming everywhere. There's lens flares going all over the place. There's twinkles all over. Her dress is sparkly. It's just a magnificent show of opulence and just decadence. This is the land in its most beautiful time. And this is, a most joyous moment and occasion for Arthur. So this is the high pinnacle of it all. I love it. I love it. Well, it's just wonderful.
Right. And for a mythological or fable-like storytelling, a marriage is a consummation. It is the ultimate reconciliation of a relationship. And I do notice that consummation event occur in stories at certain times, and the weddings are one of the more famous of the consummation events. It's there's Guinevere, there's Arthur. Well, boom, this results in the consummation of this relationship, which is marriage. Which in this context is like, now she's the queen. Now there's going to be an heir. There's going to be a prince. There's the kingdom will expand. Continuity is assured if she can bear a child, and all of these things are attached to this one event.
Yes. The thing that, always sticks with me is just not just the beauty of it, but how it feels like it's from another era and time. Whether it's 100% accurate to, the date, it just takes you away from our time period, our timeline.
Right. Escapism.
Puts us right in there. I mean, and with every detail just really exquisite and beautiful. It is a spectacle in the movie. And of course, we have this image here, which is, I guess you would say, like a Christ-like image in the back of him, kind of linking him to a Christ-like figure.
Messianic.
Yes, because of how he has taken on the responsibility to do the things that he's doing as a king. He is embodying a legend himself.
Yes. Yeah. And what's interesting, and I haven't published this anywhere yet, but so the classical hero's journey is usually this idea of worthiness in the sense that you're a farmhand, you're kind of a guy in the corner of society, you're just an average guy, and you're going to become worthy of these high points.
Yeah.
King Arthur, because of its mythology and mythological elements, believe it or not, actually takes a different angle. And I've been writing this down. It's a different type of burden. Superman has this. Superman 1978. The burden of the perfect character, right? What if you're the anointed one? What if you're King Arthur? What if you're Superman and you can't be destroyed? You start with perfection.
Yeah.
Which is not where Luke starts. That's not where the average guy starts. The average guy starts unworthy, unremarkable, ordinary. Arthur is burdened, and this is a great shot you have. He is burdened by this great role, the burden of perfection, right?
Yes.
You must live up to this impossible ideal. You must be a messianic leader of a society. You have to lead a culture, a civilization. You must bring prosperity, and you must do it using ethics and all these other things. So we are seeing this almost from the opposite lens of when you start with worthiness and guaranteed excellence, how then does that character live up to that?
Yes.
And that's a very different type of a burden. And it's a great one. And I love it. And what a great shot.
Yeah. It's fantastic. Again, another shot that when you see it, you know what movie it's from. And by the way, this armor is just like sick.
Yeah, it is, man. I love it. The silver sheen.
It's just wonderful. And, just the design of it is just like totally epic. I love seeing it.
When you have a shot like this in film, you are showing us, the faces and the greats of the past. And you're alive and in flesh. So this is part of that cultural continuity issue that I see in stories. He must now live up to these other greats. There's a great scene, and it devastated me the first time I saw it in The King's Speech, a totally different movie, where he stutters. So he's supposed to be this great king, but he has the stuttering problem, which makes him feel very unremarkable, if not flawed. While he's in this moment where he's in like this great, I think there's a consummation event, a ceremony signaling this passage of him as king. And while he's standing there, he's mentally shrinking in this moment. And then the music kind of shows all these like famous portraits of the kings of England that came before him. Boom, King Henry stood in this room and did your thing. Boom, King George I stood in this room and did your thing. And he's like, I'm a stutterer. Like, he's like shrinking under the gaze of these great kings of the past. And so you get a little bit of that in a scene like this, where the greatness of the past is literally hovering over you and looking down upon you.
Yeah. I can't say how much I love that. And I love your explanation of that, that scene in the King's Speech.
Oh, yeah.
And so at the same time, we are having an introduction to a character we've already met, and she's just all
Yes,
grown up now. And this is Morgana of Cornwall,
with
the
I mean
young
Helen Mirren,
child.
just an incredible role.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Now let's try to remember what happened to her character before, where
Right,
she is the witness to her mother's unfortunate circumstance that produced Arthur, who is now king,
right. So she
something.
witnesses the act of the attack of deception upon her mother.
Yes,
And it's a successful attack, right? Well, assault is what it is, cloaked in the mythological magic, right?
yes,
The
yes.
dragon's breath and all that. So she witnesses this and she knows the truth. And we talked earlier
The
about
truth,
how
yes.
powerful that is for a young heroine to be in possession of the truth like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough thing because if no one else believes in the truth, then you're stuck with this thing, And you see that this has affected her adversely. She has a dark side.
Yes.
She shows up. She is now a young woman, an adult. She's not looking at the world through the eyes of a child anymore. And she has some ambitions. And they're not exactly the most moral of ambitions.
Yes, there's a lot of animosity, you can just tell. She's at the wedding and she is meeting for the first time, well, actually for the second time, Merlin, who she is seductively approaching. And
Mhm.
I thought it was very interesting, her revealing that she is part of this, he called it necromancing. And he got the ways of the necromancer. And there's a lot we learned from this conversation he has with her, because she is showing how much she knows, what roots she knows, that she can see a little bit in the future.
Right.
He's also, there's sort of an alliance being built, but we know that something doesn't feel right here, right? We know
Well, right. It's
something's
an
not right
improper
here.
request of a sort, right? That
Yeah.
it feels that way. Like she's making an improper request and he's
Yeah.
aware of it.
Yeah.
And instead of just denying her, he leaves a path open to it in some way, right?
Yes, and really by the end of that scene, you get this idea that there's the union happening between Guinevere and King Arthur, but there's also a union between Merlin and Morgana. It's a little more than just, hey, I'll teach you my ways. She's also offering a companionship, if you will.
Right.
I thought that was really interesting. I was like, oh, okay, so we have like two weddings happening here, a double wedding.
Right. Another consummation event. A consummation event is something that where a relationship of sorts is made official in some way. That's really what a consummation event is. And you're right, that is like that.
Yeah. We learn later on specifically that this is all part of strategy, which I'm like,
Right.
oh, this is great.
Yeah,
So
she's playing the long game.
she's playing the very long game, and it's just incredible because it's actually well done. So she has begun the first step in her plan. And then we have Percival, which I don't have a picture of him as a young boy just yet, but Percival is sort of a guy who is hanging out in the forest, sees Sir Lancelot and wants to be his squire. But Sir Lancelot is really like, you can't really like tie him down to anything because he's basically as many chances as he can get. He wants to not be anywhere near the castle because he doesn't want to be tempted by Guinevere. This thing between her and him is just something he's been fighting all these years.
His whole strategy there is avoidance.
Yes, and you get the sense that between the time of Morgana's union with Merlin, that it is there's been some time because they have now built a castle. They have now built the round table. So this is now becoming it's like a couple of years later now. And that's another thing. Yeah. I think a lot of people too don't realize that there's been a time while watching this that there was a time jump. And that's also been sort of a problem but there has been quite a bit of time. So it's been years that he's been going off to do his own thing in the forest, while they're like, "Where's Sir Lancelot?" He's gone. He's not trying to sleep with his best friend's wife. So
Right.
Percival ends up just being in the castle and being to the point of like, this is his dreams comes true. He's seeing the knights at the round table, and you kind of get that feeling at seeing this particular scene here, where this is not only his dream come true. We're seeing it too. We're like, oh my God, this is the knights of the of the round table. It's a fantasy that many people have dreamt about, an idea people have thought about. We've seen other movies, but this is like a glorious love. They're all in silver, shiny silver, sitting at this round table.
Right, it's like a little hero worship, right? You're like,
yeah.
Oh wow, idolize my these are the guys, and he gets to see it. So you are getting that sort of innocent, looking, observing these larger than life warriors,
Yeah, and this is like, if you're a kid at this point in time in this in this world, you'd want to be one day, you'd want to be a knight, because they're just the pinnacle of what a man should be in this time period. Again, the moral code, and the honor, the truth, all of those things that these warriors stood for, pretty much. And not only that, the land is prospering from their presence. So
right,
there's more than just the fable of them. It's actually what they're doing at the time.
Right. There's like good governing going on.
Yeah. And so we end up with Percival at the table here, pouring wine. But just so happens we have a little romantic thing going on with
Morgana spinning her webs.
She's spinning her web with her beauty and her charms, getting into the mind of Sir Gawain and telling him of the, I think there's something going on between the Queen and Lancelot. And so I think at one point she's like, oh, look at how she looks at his cup, she's like whispering in his ear, and he's like, this is a very intense offense at this point in time that is punishable by death. So when he says he demands justice, he demands her death. That's pretty intense, and without much proof at all. And so that's also
by accusation.
Yeah. So that's also the saddest part about it, but also it shows you the savagery of still that time period, but also like the need for her to have a champion, because at this point she really is innocent. They haven't done anything.
Correct.
She may like him. There may be some tensions between them, but they haven't done anything. Sir Lancelot is staying away so they can stay innocent.
So her character, she knew the truth of a very specific event in the past. And so this is oddly in line with her worldview, right? She knows something true about the world. She knows that there is desire in Lancelot for Guinevere, which is explaining his odd behavior, and that there is desire from Guinevere toward Lancelot. That's the truth.
Yes.
Now, to your point, both of these two individuals have handled themselves perfectly, really. I shouldn't say perfectly, but relatively well.
They haven't
right.
They haven't actually gone through with any of the things that they're
nothing. Lancelot didn't even let it get off the ground. He, his policy of avoidance works. And what she's doing that's a little evil is that she's taking the truth.
Yes.
She's giving him a glimpse of the truth and then inferring a crime that has not been committed.
Yes.
And he makes the same, he infers the same thing at this point. And what's interesting, I think, in this exact part of the movie, King Arthur says something like, man, we are batting 1,000 right now. Everything is perfect. Everything is good. And then Merlin's like, well, bad things happen where you least expect it. And
there we go. The visual. Yes, and I thought that this was really interesting. Yeah, 'cause Merlin says good and evil is all about you, and when he says evil, he looks directly at Morgana, and I was like, wow. So he knows something about this lady, and every time I see it, I realize how much he really like plays into her quite a bit. But
Right.
but
He
there's also
underestimates her.
he underestimates her, and also there's a bit of timing involved too. He's is like, it's where you least expected always, and it's like,
Right.
oh, so he knows a lot about the future that's going to happen, but it is something that he can't reveal at this point in time. And I love these little hints from Merlin. He tells a little bit about the future, but doesn't give you everything. So, but once it's already happened, you're like, oh, I remember what Merlin said.
Yeah. He gave
And
us the hint.
yeah, he did. So, the accusation comes flying out. Guinevere tries to make peace. She's like, okay, I'll forgive you for what you just said. Here's Sir Lancelot's cup, and just drink from it, and share in the goodness and that's in his heart.
Which is a
Gawain,
diplomatic act on her
yeah,
part.
very diplomatic, very queenly. Gawain is just not having it.
Well,
I
well,
know
it
there.
also is a form of exonerating her.
Yes, yes,
So there
yes,
is a sense that she will benefit from him. Because here's the thing, and this is the evil that Morgana is working off of.
ooh, yes,
The grain of truth in all of this. She
yeah,
knows there
yes,
is desire
yes,
there. She knows that is
yes.
true. And so
Everybody
there
does.
is, right, there's a whiff of her trying to absolve herself of this truth, to
Yes,
bury this truth. And that's where I think he's struggling, because the truth is the thing that he doesn't want to bury, that there's desire there. It
yes,
doesn't matter that no one's committed a crime. The truth is there's desire there, and to him and to this story, that is a crime anyway. That desire.
yes, yes. I
Right.
love. See, yes, yeah, you nailed it right on the head there. It is so true because and we'll learn some of that later. But King Arthur is pissed, and he grabs the sword, and he's about. It looks like he's about to challenge Gawain, and I was like, oh snap! But he doesn't.
Right.
Let's go to Guinevere for a moment. It's probably the biggest turnoff for her because here she
Oh,
met this
right.
guy, and she fell in love with a guy who was like jumping off of buildings onto like creeks, and like becoming and demanding to be king. And she cannot believe her eyes when she sees him. It's like, aren't you going to be my champion? And he's like, no, I can't. I have to be your king and judge you on this. And I was like, wow, that is a sure enough as a turnoff, because she
Right.
wanted him to fight for her like a man and
Right.
not be a king for 5 minutes. You know what I mean?
Right,
And
which he has done before. We talked about, sitting at the round table. It's an egalitarian move to
yeah.
say that I am not above this, that I am not separate from the group.
Mm,
When the Lancelot's defeating all the knights early in the story, Arthur's like, "You guys did it, I will do it." So
yes.
he has demonstrated the willingness, correctly, I would say, to not always to elevate yourself above the crowd, but to do, like you said, champion her as a man, not as an observer king.
Yes,
Right.
yes. And so he's like, I can't, I've got to start, being more of a king than just a mere man. They have a great like lovers spat, if you will, or marital spat, where she actually tells him like, why can't you do this for me?
Man up.
Yeah. And it's not true. And they love each other very much. I believe that they did love each other very much.
Yes.
And so what was the problem? And so at this point, for her, nobody is going to stand up for her. So she has to wait for Sir Lancelot to come and stand up for her. And how do you think that's going to make her feel about Sir Lancelot? You know what I mean? But
100%. So right, the king is absent in her defense.
Yes.
and the man she desires is present.
Yeah, yeah.
So like it's like the perfect, like it is a rapid switch, and you could see, like, even as a viewer, even as a man, you're like, oh man, Arthur, your stock is dropping, bro.
Yes,
Like
yes,
in
yes,
real
yes. It's a
time.
wrong move. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
really felt for her character, but I wouldn't say that she was right in everything that she did. But I say that her feelings at this point, when she is, innocent, maybe had some emotional like desire for somebody, but she never acted on those. I think
Right.
that not acting on is more of of a measure of her loyalty than anything. But
100% on both of, and he's so loyal to the king. He's going through extreme measures to ensure chastity,
yes,
honesty, and virtue. And
yeah,
she's been fine. They have a clean record, right?
yes,
So, but yeah,
yeah,
this him now championing her is really going to muddy the waters on the desire side.
yes.
And it's happening as Arthur's stock is dropping. So it really is like a perfect storm brewing.
Yes. Well, the night before, maybe a couple of nights before, Sir Lancelot is saying something. He said something really interesting. Even though we're innocent in our hearts, we're guilty as can be.
Right. That is the
And
truthful side that
that's
everyone's
true.
struggling with. Right.
Yeah,
The truth.
yeah, the truth of it. And he dreams. During his dream, he dreams that he is fighting himself, and when he wakes up, there's a sword inside of him. Like, okay, so now tell me about this scene here. Did it not look real to you? Like
I can't see it. Doesn't look like makeup. It doesn't. I mean, it looks pretty authentic.
like it looks like they stabbed this actor in order to make this scene.
Listen,
It's
are you
gross.
devoted to this movie?
Yes, just stab me right in the gut.
All right, I really want this movie to succeed. Go for it.
And like when he pulls it out, I'm like, that looks real. I slowed it down and everything. I'm like, oh my god, that's just crazy. So yeah, this scene, I don't know how they pulled it off, other than actually stabbing the actor, but it's so realistic. Good job. But this sets up an incredible scene in a few minutes. But him being wounded this way, him battling
Yes.
himself, and the self battle, he is his own worst enemy. And he creates this wound that he can never heal really from, because it's just so devastating that he can hurt himself like this.
Well, but the symbolism is extremely powerful here, right?
Yes.
So he's fighting himself. The sword, I would say, is like the symbol in this case for the truth, right? The truth is that this desire exists, and so he's been fighting himself on this.
Yeah,
and it's a tough battle, and the truth pierces him, right? And it leaves a wound.
The sword is the truth. Ooh, I love that.
Yes, and so the truth is that this desire is real and it exists. He's obviously been fighting himself over, and then the sword goes through him and it creates a wound, and this wound does not heal.
Yeah.
So the truth of this situation does create a real problem that causes a lot of anguish in this world for all these characters. It's really the catalyst event in which everything goes south. Everyone's lives change. The relationships all change. And there is a diminishment in Camelot.
Yeah, yeah. Meanwhile, of course, Morgana is trying to get as much information as she can from Merlin, and it's entertaining to see her tempt him. And again, we're dealing, in the beginning of the movie, I didn't address this, but at some point, Uther says, "You're not a man. You don't understand."
Yeah, you're not a man.
Yeah, you don't understand lust, and obviously he does understand lust and temptation, because he falls under sort of Morgana's spell, if you will, of love and attraction, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's happening while we're having this really intense thing happen here, where the joust has begun, but it's a more of a challenge to the death for the truth. This is one of the most incredible scenes, because Sir Lancelot's late. right? He's late because we saw him get stabbed. We're like, okay, he might be dead, but
Oh, right.
he's late. What happens is that the young boy Percival takes upon to
Defend the queen.
defend the queen.
Champion the
Now,
queen.
like just before that, they asked everybody, like, will any one of my knights, if anyone, like, defend the queen for this? Not one hand risen, not one person to stand up and take the challenge. That means everybody
right.
believes that
In
she
this
is,
world,
yeah,
that is evidence of the corruption setting in.
yes,
Nobody's willing to defend the queen. So although the truth is that desire exists, no crime was committed. And so she is worth championing.
yeah,
And none of the knights who should be virtuous and champion her are up to this. And yet virtue and the future of the round table exists where you least expect it. So he's less corruptible. And what he does here is evidence of his secret nobility that the knights are now losing.
They're losing. They've lost, and just a little bit later, it's like we've lost our way. And you're absolutely right. This young man, Percival, embodies the absolute epitome of what a knight should be. And even though he's not a knight. And as soon as he comes, says, "I'll champion the queen." Okay, fast track knighthood. He's like, Neil, and we got a knight, from Percival becomes a knight because of his bravery to stand up for a woman who not one person stood up for her.
Right, and he's a great contrast character because he is in a way emulating Arthur's growth arc.
Yeah,
Arthur had a similar, right? Arthur had a similar.
Absolutely.
He was a squire. He drew this sword. He needed to be knighted on the spot in order to earn a certain moment. So, very similar pattern here so Percival is kind of a doppelganger character. He technically is who Arthur was.
Ooh.
Not who Arthur is anymore. So he's a great contrast character because you can see that. Believe it or not, in hero-centric stories, the fragile power sometimes is that to the heroine. Where the fragile power is reflective of a less experienced version of the heroine. And that's why she's so defensive toward the heroine, because where no one bet on her, no one gave her a chance, she is going to give the fragile power a chance. So she's going to champion but it's similar here in this scenario where the virtues of Arthur of his youth are now embodied in Percival.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. Percival is just the guy you just didn't see coming.
Yes, I love it.
Secret weapon you just didn't see coming. And, he is going to die. Okay. Let's just put it. He's facing
he's not going to be
seasoned knight. Okay. Right. In Gawain, and he's going to die.
That's even more heroic of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that he's not choosing a fight he can win.
Yeah.
To champion the queen. Like, it's one thing if you're like, oh, I could beat this dude. I'll champion. That's one thing. But to know you're going to lose and to champion the queen anyway is very heroic to us, the viewer, right?
So, I mean, and so your view of like Gawain is like down there, and your view of Percival is like way up there, because you're just like, this kid is going to get. This is not a fight, really. He's going to die, and he has no armor. He has not one stitch of armor on.
Amazing.
So he's really throwing himself into a dire situation just for honor, and
right. And there's this kind of mystical belief in this warrior justice system that whoever's on the side of truth will win.
Ooh,
meaning,
yes.
Right, that it supersedes combat skill. And so he's subscribing to that. I am on the side of truth. I will win, even if I'm unarmed, no matter what it is, even if he's the experienced knight. So he's operating on that belief.
Okay, yes. Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because that puts in another perspective to all of this. He thinks he's going to win. Yeah, okay, great.
Simply, which is the virtuous thing for the knight to do. I am on the side of truth. I will fight as though I will win because I'm on that side. And and that is the right side. That is the virtue that is missing from Camelot right now.
And well, I didn't have any pictures of the fight, but Sir Lancelot does show up, and he is in a desperate situation. I really wish I had some stills for this. He's crawling on the ground.
Here, I'll just pretend like it's still.
Yeah. he's really is struggling for life here during the battle, but he's really skilled and proves it by actually taking down Gawain and also getting a confession or getting a statement. The queen is innocent.
Yeah.
I was like, oh god, that's what we needed.
That's awesome. And is it like Morgana, like, oh, you ruined it?
She's pissed. So I guess that's the end of their relationship. But
I was supposed to use you, and you blew it, so you're out.
Yeah, and they said that there was a real romance between Liam Neeson and Helen Mirren, and yeah, on the set they even lived together for a little bit. Between this picture and the last one, Sir Lancelot is about to die, and we can overlook this scene many times, but he's about to die, and so we have this moment where Arthur is demanding of Merlin, whatever the cost.
Oh, right.
Bring him back, whatever the cost. And Merlin's like, okay, and then he grabs Guinevere's hand and puts it right over that wound and uses that as a vessel to heal Sir Lancelot. And it is really like just saying again, we talked about Guinevere being a healer, and that's another like through her he's able to heal Sir Lancelot. And it was very interesting because whatever the cost, he knew what that was. And so there's a little
that's eerily similar to Uther's language, right?
Yes.
Whatever the cost, I must have her, kind of thing.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up because there is especially the way it's demanded, and yet there was again the future is being set in the present by doing that. They were creating. He could have just died there. He could have just died there, and that would be the end of this whole thing.
Right.
But because they brought him back, and of course left the two of them in the room together.
So you guys talking over. Here's some wine. Here's some Barry Manilow. I'll be back in 3 hours.
Throw another Barry in there, Barry White. Yes, it was really interesting. And then in the hallway, Merlin and Arthur had a little talk, and that talk is also pregnant with like so much information because he's like, will Guinevere, he doesn't even finish it, and Merlin says yes. And he's like, will I ever have a child? He says yes. It's like all the things that are going to happen, but not the way he wants it.
Misleading.
Yeah. And so there's even a mention of the mental breakdown that Arthur is going to have in the future. And it's played for laughs. It's played for laughs. Yeah. And so, and Arthur is in full knowledge of all these things that he asked him, like, is Guinevere gonna, whatever the rest was. He's in full knowledge of that, but at the same time, they end the scene with laughter. Yeah, and I'm not sure if it says something about Arthur, like he was just wanting the world to just be, jovial and, good and happy.
I see what you're saying.
Or if he just,
that he's not really dealing with the problems that he's discussing.
As a man, because he doesn't realize, and maybe it's just half realized for him, that he is connected to the land. And so if any of those things go to the point where it makes him and puts him in a bad position, the land will be affected. So I think he doesn't understand that he has to address those things at this point because it will affect him in the future. And
laughter over something serious is like a classic signal of immaturity. An immature. You're laughing at something. It's like, well, okay.
This is part of him beginning the part of forgetting that he's part of the land.
Oh, true. Yep.
Yeah. So he asked Merlin at this really big function that they're having here. Sir Lancelot's there. What is the true value of a knight? And I love this because Merlin says truth is the
Okay.
greatest value, which we've had the thread of truth being something that is absolutely valuable in this story. It's been
Right.
brought up so many times. And he says, when a man lies, he murders some part of the world. Ah, so
Ooh,
good. This is the dialogue. There's just so many like really wonderful quotes that are from this movie in particular that just
absolutely
really
correct.
excellent. But I found that to be very interesting because we have truth being brought up a little bit later on too. It's just a common thread that's really the strongest, probably the stronger. It's even stronger than lust because we talked about lust, but being a strong thread. But truth seems to be that one thing that we keep getting recycled in the story.
Yeah, it's a theme.
Yeah, it really is. The energy, the the sparks between these two is just like insane. He has
Yeah.
to leave. He like literally is like, I'm out of here. I can't be in this room with this lady. And
Yeah.
she's the looks this woman is
Oh, she
giving.
does not want him to leave. Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. And then she, at some point, she gives like this look around the room to see if anybody's looking. And
Yeah.
she just can't help herself. So she runs to him and they get together in the forest
Yeah, it's
with,
very Adam and Eve or Daphne and Chloe, like
yes,
the sacred grove.
yes, yes. And it's just like the two of them and nature. And they're like right on the rocks. Like they're not even trying
Yeah.
to find like a soft place where they can hang out. It's like, oh, well, this little rocky area with a like
That's fine. That'll do.
absolutely that'll do it.
Yeah. Well, it
Uh-huh.
underscores the urgency, which is the level of desire here is maximum.
Ooh, yeah, yeah.
You know.
It's wild. These kids are, they need a room, and
Yeah. Well, they found one out there and consummate this desire, this truth
yeah,
between them that they've both been denying honorably. The shatters here.
yeah,
There is dishonor on some level, but it's also truth. This was a true desire. So
yes.
there's something honest about it as well.
Mhm,
So it's a
mhm.
little bit of a mixed bag.
Now, at this point, a lot of things are happening all at once while the couple is in the forest. Arthur is having his last conversation in the real world with Merlin. And
Right.
this part really made me cry a few times because
Oh,
it is father and son saying goodbye for the final time. And it's not like an emotionally driven kind of thing. And I don't think I would have wanted that, but it is like it is their final time speaking. And so I thought that it was really kind of sweet in a way.
yeah,
um,
bittersweet.
yeah, yeah. The world is about to change.
Right. Very
Merlin,
heavy.
yeah, Merlin has to go away because he says that this is not my time. And he even mentions this when he first meets Morgana that, the new gods are coming and they're going to replace the pagan gods. Another thing he says is that there are other worlds, and that fascinated me. I was like, there are other worlds, and he says, "I'm this one is done with me." And so I was very his all of his dialogue just fascinated me because it was almost like he was teaching us about the ancient world and like creation, all that stuff. He basically has to go into a place where he called the coils of the dragon. Before he does that, he goes to meet Morgana, and she is hatching up a potion. He seems to be very disappointed in her. She convinces him to take her so she can learn about more of the stuff. Now, I believe his plan was to lure her to the coils of the dragon and trap her there so she could not cause any more trouble.
Right. He seems to be onto her throughout the whole movie. He just underestimated her ability to outmaneuver him.
Yeah, that it was about timing, because at the very same time we have Arthur stabbing Excalibur into the earth, and that did something to him. It hurt him, because there's a flash of a moment where Excalibur is through his body. So I think he and the dragon and the earth are connected, and so that's why he felt that pain. Again, it's a bit abstract. They could have cleared things, but Arthur stabbing the earth was symbolized visually with Excalibur
impaling him.
impaling Merlin. And it was just one of
Right.
those moments where you're like, oh, okay. And maybe that could have been a little bit clearer, but for whatever that meant, that was the advantage, or the few moments that Morgana needed to turn things around. And so she was like, okay, and she started like, okay, tell me the words of making. Tell me speak
Right.
the words of the charm of making. And that was him revealing that helped her to, entrap him. But also she was like learning them on the spot. And then she was able to entrap him into his own spell, the spell that he had meant for her. So unfortunately it was a backfire, and that takes Merlin out of the picture for quite some time. What did you feel about all this?
I always like when powerful characters play chess like this, in a way. So it was interesting seeing Merlin get tricked and outmaneuvered by the apprentice, so to say.
Yes.
Which showed her degree of ambition, that her dark side, that she wants to take on the master, and she is willing to try to go past him by force, in a way. So, and then of course you get a sense that Arthur's now unprotected, right? That the wise guide is gone. The loss of the wise guide is a trope in the hero's journey, and we have that here. The wise guide is lost.
Yes. And I also believe that he has always said of her, I can see your father's eyes. You have your father's eyes. He's mentioned that multiple times. I believe, of course, that through Morgana, Cornwall is getting his revenge, or Morgana is the vessel for his revenge. She blames Merlin for all of it because it was his spell that was cast to deceive her mother. So she really does blame him for a lot.
And he is partially to blame. I mean, he enabled the assault to take place. He disguised Uther to create the deception. So he's sitting right there. He is guilty,
Yeah, she's getting her revenge and loving it. Actually, she actually also learned the charm of making, which makes her even more powerful. We have these two waking up in the forest to find out that Excalibur has been shoved into the earth. I thought it was very interesting because there is a scene where Excalibur is like right at their necks.
Yep.
I'm like, oh God, he's gonna kill both of them.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. He just leaves Excalibur there.
Well, and here again, the sword symbolizes truth. What he's saying is, I know the truth.
Yeah.
By leaving the sword behind. And when they see the sword, they know he knows the truth. And they're like, oh, we blew it. Like that, now the truth is out.
Yeah. I mean, it's a powerful moment, and it was filmed beautifully. Sir Lancelot says, a king without a sword. So this has upended their society completely. All the good that they fought for. He leaves it there. He doesn't know if it's going to stay there, if it's lost forever. Arthur is without a sword. He literally
abandons Excalibur.
Which I mean was a crazy thing to do, but that's what he did. Morgana has used the charm of making, which I thought was very interesting, to disguise herself as Guinevere and does something with her brother she really shouldn't.
Yeah. We have this problem again here. She disguises herself as Guinevere and basically seduces Arthur which is the opposite, which is the very crime that she witnessed as a child. So now she is repeating this crime herself.
Yes,
So it's interesting that she has now worn this as a mantle and
she is
has
going
now
to do to them exactly what was done to her family. And so
correct.
under this disguise, she's able to get pregnant. They have this elaborate scene where she's giving birth 9 months later, and
Right.
the knights are all gathered. And they said, oh, Morgana just had a child. And a lightning bolt just comes through the room and hits King Arthur, and he's out. Ever since then, after that, he's just like a hot mess. He's
Oh
just
yeah.
sick, or they don't explain exactly what the sickness is, but he just isn't in good health. They have to prop him up for everything, and he's aging rapidly. He's just really not in good shape after that lightning bolt. At the same time, he says, look, there's something that has been lost. It's the Grail. He sends all the knights to go look for the Grail. And so I think this might be the one part of the storytelling that was a little bit disconnected, because we had no reference for the Grail before that scene. And if it could have been like at the wedding, like, oh, this is the Grail, another one of our, something like that at the wedding would have been really great to introduce.
Right. Agreed.
It just did come out of nowhere, but this leads us to the character of Percival and all
Right.
of the other knights that are around to go to these quests to see if they can
Yes.
find the Holy Grail. And so they go out on this Grail. It's really interesting how the music starts all excited, and he's like galloping, and he's like,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden he's like encountering like the wilderness and cold, and his
Yeah.
armor is all rusted, and he looks really awful. And he sees one of the knights, and he's like, oh, did you find it? And he's frozen still, and it's just demoralizing. He's like, oh, we're never gonna find it. But he continues on. And so that's basically most of this act, is him looking for the Grail and encountering all sorts of horrific sights. I mean, they're really great. And he
Yeah.
sees Gawain, the great knight Gawain, who he was going to go up against and fight,
Right.
just completely decimated there. He sees this child that is in all gold armor that's laughing.
Right.
And
Very disturbing image of this
imagery, yes.
child warrior.
Oh gosh, it's really disturbing. Yes. This is the thing that was really crazy seeing this for the first time, was this tree of people just be hanging
Yes.
from it. That's terrifying.
Yes.
And
And you get this sense of real loss. Like these knights were just these gallant, wonderful knights. Like you said, that moment when Percival saw them in the round table for the first time, the hero
yeah.
worship. Now these guys are disposable. You get a sense that they are dying easily and squandered and disposable. It's awful. It's like Order 66 for King Arthur's knights.
Yes. Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. And and the tree, is a symbolism of the loss of the round table. The fact that the land also the tree is barren of any leaves. I'd hate to show it, but this
Yeah.
particular scene was really graphic, but it was rest assured, no real humans were involved in this. The eyeballs were from, I believe, either goat or sheep.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there was a cameraman set up for days until a crow came by, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, so they really waited it out for this particular scene to have that effect. And it's
Wow.
really powerful, right? If you see it,
Yeah.
you're like, wow, how did they do
Yeah.
that? Yeah. What kind of
Yeah.
magic did they
Yikes.
do? Yeah, it looks very realistic and gross.
Yikes.
So yeah, it's just one of the grossest things ever. But this is the trap that's being laid in place by Morgana. And when I think about it, I mean, these are all people she knew in court.
Yeah. She's like Emperor Palpatine in this.
Yeah, she knew these guys. And that's the saddest part, is like you think you know somebody, and then she's planning your demise. Her son, I want to say he's about 11 or 10 years old now.
Yeah, he's young. He's not. He seems like maybe 13. Maybe. I
Yeah,
got a
yeah.
sense maybe like preteen.
Percival has been on his quest for 10 years.
So he's 10 years old.
So he's about 10 or 11 years old. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's young.
Yeah, that's pretty young. He's basically like second in command of this little fortress here. What I would say of the young boy Mordred, her son, with King Arthur, he is very arrogant and spoiled. if you will.
Wicked, yeah.
Yeah.
He definitely is the evil child archetype.
Yeah, he's seen a lot of murder and he's a party to this whole thing. What she's been doing is that she's been getting all of the knights, she's been tricking them all this time. So that way it will be very easy for her son later on to take over the castle. So it
Right.
will be very easy for him in battle. So I thought that was very strategic. Her just like zeroing in on the best soldiers, the knights of the round table.
Yeah, I mean, you're wiping out his
them.
military in a sense.
Yeah. Now, although he has a replacement, these aren't the veterans. These aren't the same guys that that helped form the unity in the first place. These are incredible fighters. Look at Gawain in his prime. It is definitely, I would say, a very strategic plan that she has going on here. I love that we get to see her enact that, even though it's gross and terrible because she ends up like just putting everybody on the tree anyway. But Percival is an honorable knight, and he does not fall for her tricks and her magic. He is put on the tree, and I would say in a stroke of luck, he's placed right underneath some another person.
Stirrup.
With the stirrup spur that's cutting through the rope. What I thought was really interesting is that in order to find out more about the Grail, or being close to get the Grail, each time he's almost like brought very close to death.
Right.
And he's almost dying. Cinematography and just the styling is just incredible here.
Oh yeah.
The way, I mean, it's very, very epic. And it is just like breathtaking.
Yeah.
It is maybe a little bit disjointed from the rest of the film, because you look at this and you're like, what does this have to do with Excalibur? What does this have to do with, King Arthur and all that stuff? But it is still like a wonderful story, just of like Percival and getting to his arc as a character. I mean,
yes,
just really great stuff here.
Right. Well, in the first act, it was a really Uther story.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get the two Arthur acts, and then you really get Parzival's story here in this act.
Yes. So the first time also that I noticed that he came with armor, which is different from the second time. And Yeah, and when he's asked, do you know the secret of the Grail? Yeah.
Who does it serve?
He didn't have the answer, and he ran away. He ran away from the answer. And then we're brought back to reality, where I noticed how there's green because the magic is affecting him. So I love that touch, because I'm like, oh, the magic is affecting him. Then we have this really interesting cut where we have Morgana. She's literally grooming him into King Arthur's most dangerous adversary. She's rubbing these oils on him for protection. This is about, I would say, 10 years later. He's now a man. She is rubbing the oils for protection, and she also gets him some magic on his armor, so that way he's impenetrable. Now, I think in this whole relationship between her and her son, there is a lot of themes going on with vanity and pride.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. Vanity. We've got gold on gold on gold.
Yeah.
I mean,
bling.
Yeah, bling on bling. And then, that helmet has almost no function, really. I mean, it seems like it would be more of a problem than actually that. Also, if we notice, Morgana has not aged. So we have even more vanity. Pridefully, what's it called? Pride. And the fact that they, too, are now vessels for the rest of Cornwell's revenge. And it's like they have not given up that goal to get that revenge for what was done in the past and will never be forgotten through these guys. But I really would have loved a little bit more interactions between the mom and the son.
Yeah, they did move through it quickly at this point, I would say.
Yeah, they were moving at a at a very fast pace to get to the next series of events, which is the upcoming war with Mordred, really setting his sights on his father. So he has this meeting with his father, and his father is like, "Hey, I can offer you love and warmth and all that stuff." He's like, "That is what I don't want from you."
Yeah. Yeah, that's the only thing I don't care about. Yeah.
Yeah. He wants to take the castle by force. There's no peace here. There will never be a relationship between him and his father.
Right.
It's all about the battle, winning it by force. And, once he becomes king, how will he treat the people? How will he?
Not well. You definitely get a sense that this guy is not king material either.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he's very cruel. He's seen a lot of murder and has been a party to a lot of murder. He has no respect for the knight or the history that's been placed for the culture. Just no respect for that at all. And so that is one of the things that, where you're just knowledgeable that this is going to be a very cruel king. At this point, King Arthur has given up. You feel like he's just like, okay, we're going to go to war.
Non-responsive.
Yeah, he's just does not want to fight anymore. And I think it's the toll of that whole situation with Guinevere and Sir Lancelot, their union and what it did to him and his response to it, leaving Excalibur out there. So I think all of that is playing emotionally with him and being tricked by Morgana. That's the final straw.
Well, but also he sent all his knights off. Now they're gone. He spent all of his knights.
Yes, his best ones.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still some knights there, but they're not the, they're not his boys. So this armor, if we could speak about it, besides just the regalia of it, I love this picture, to be honest, because it looks it's very stylized. Again, once you see this, it's Excalibur, but also there's something about it that is scary too.
Yeah, it's menacing. What is that? There's a certain menace to it. It's a clash of images. It's like a childish face, but it's not pleasant looking, and it's off-putting, and like there's definitely something evil and malevolent about the armor.
Yes, and I think this is like a John Boorman thing, because there's the movie Zardoz where there were floating heads. I just saying it just is making me laugh. But there was a floating heads were kind of ships that were flying around, and the faces that they use for Zardoz is definitely very similar to the face that's used on that mask. It was
interesting,
kind of a scary face. And we have Percival, and this scene, when I very first saw it, really confused me. I was like, oh, he's a knight. Why is he hiding at this point? But it's probably the wisest thing he could have ever done, because he's watching Mordred basically chase down and beat down Uriens. And Uriens, remember Uriens, his impassioned change at the very beginning of the story, where he's really, really, against this boy king coming into power. And then all of a sudden he's like, I'll doubt you no more. And he gets down on his knees and kisses his hand.
Also in water.
In water, right? Actually, that scene, everybody is like knee deep in water. It's really incredible. So again, we're by another body of water. This is his last scene. And he has done the ultimate sacrifice for his loyalty, because he has been delivered a mortal blow, a very fatal blow by Mordred. Percival runs over and is like, I'm sorry, I couldn't be there, but he's like, "You're the last of us. You've got to pursue the Grail."
Yeah.
And even in his dying words, he's still saying, "Continue the quest," and
Don't give
it
up.
is, yeah, he still believes in Arthur. He still believes in being a knight and the knighthood and what it stands for. So I had like a little tear in my eyes. I was like, "Oh, you're in."
Yeah. No, you're totally right. I get it and I agree. And it's great dialogue. And you just said, you're the last of us. And he was the least of them at
Yes,
one point.
yes, 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 yes,
So
yes.
so there's definitely the sense of like, as far as the Knights of the Round Table, we're at the bottom of the barrel, right?
Yes, yes,
But we've seen glimpses that Percival is very honorable, very
yes.
noble, and worthy of the Round Table. And it is odd to see all the veterans drop off and suddenly you're it,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
FARGO. He's really the young one. He's going to try to live up to this ideal that these
Yeah,
knights no longer can uphold.
yeah, and again, we mentioned before, they lost their way.
Right.
He was the one. He was just discovering his way. Even through the years now of going through the quest, he still believes, and that faith, that belief system is still there. Just love the this particular scene in particular.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. It's really good.
And let's see, we're almost at the and I wanted to show this from his
Yeah.
experience, humble beginnings of not believing to becoming the ultimate believer. Just
Yeah,
wonderful.
and he's the second to the last of them. So he made it pretty far,
Yeah, yeah, he did. He did. Wandering through the forest or the Badlands, it's really bad out there. Percival finds. Can you believe this is Sir Lancelot? I mean,
Sir Lancelot, right.
Sir Lancelot. This is him. And he's raving like a lunatic now. And this whole procession of people it's a funeral for a young boy. And you wouldn't notice that like right away, but if after many viewings you can see a mom that is crying over her son, and you see him laying on some wood.
Right, more
for their
evidence of
parents.
a grief-stricken land.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, really bad. So crazy, crazy. He's lost his mind.
Crazy
Sir Lancelot.
Lancelot.
Yeah, he's blaming the knights for everything, even though he's the one who caused it in the first place. Like,
Sorta, yeah.
yeah, I mean, he didn't mean to, but he did. But maybe the vanity of it all was
Well, yeah,
sort
and
of
he's
like,
kind of like a religious cult leader type of homeless
yes,
guy,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's a pretty big drop from where he was.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, and so he's raving on. He sees Percival and starts, raving. And a whole group of guys throw Percival in the river. But before Percival is taken over by the river, he manages to say, "Arthur needs you."
Right.
And that does something. Lancelot kind of gives it a little look, and I'm like, "Ooh, what's gonna happen?"
Yeah.
So you get
Yeah.
the inkling, like those were the words he needed to hear. That his friend needed him, and
Right,
so
the
that
friend
was,
he thought he betrayed. It's
yeah,
almost like a little window for redemption opened,
yes, yes,
right? That
yes,
that there's a debt that he can pay when
yes.
if Arthur does in fact need him.
And yeah, there's a part of this story which I call the redemption wing of this that we're gonna get to. It's like
Right.
a whole wing of the storyline that just covers all redemption. I love it because it's almost like the closing. You close a chapter of a book, and this is how you do it. We have another kind of near death situation with Percival, and he sheds all of his armor, and now he's practically naked in front
Right.
of the questioner of the Grail. And he knows the answer. The land and the king are one, and
Right.
that's the
That's the key piece of like knowledge.
and so with that he's granted the Grail, and he brings the Grail to King Arthur now.
So he completes the quest. I
Yes,
mean, he completes the quest.
He did it. He did it. And this Grail, I call it predator juice. Because he gets up, he's like, what? He's ready. The first thing that he does is that he's like, ready my knights for battle. Like, I'm like, yes, he's
back.
It's
That's right.
beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. He has a wonderful little speech he does, and he's like, they will ride with their king once more. It's just like, yes.
Right. They're recovering the lost value, the lost virtue.
Yeah, yeah, it was really great. As you know, from a storytelling point of view, you can't help but feel amazing when that happens. You have somebody who's been down for a long time in the story, and now he's back.
Right.
Get his armor together, get it all together, because we ride at dawn. And so I was like, yes.
Yeah.
And you see how that kind of inspires the other people. Like in this picture, Kay is right behind him. Kay, his brother. Remember him from the beginning?
Right. From the early scene when he was a squire.
Yeah, and he's still there. He's still loyal to Arthur, and it really speaks volumes. You have a lifetime of loyalty between these two brothers, and they're not even blood brothers. They're blood brothers in a more truer sense, because
Right.
they've been for each other since the beginning. And I love that. Oh, okay. So I'm going to say a few lines that he said, which were incredible. This is Nigel Terry doing incredible monologues at the end here. He's just killing it. And I became a fan of his when he did Macbeth ages ago. And the
okay.
Roman Polanski film, excellent version that he did. And so he says, Lancelot carried my honor, Guinevere my guilt, Mordred bore my sins, my knights have fought my causes. Now, brother, I shall be king. I was like, yes.
Yeah. That is fantastic dialogue. Amazing.
Yes, so inspiring, and just like he's not gonna let anybody else do anything for him anymore. He's gonna carry it all on his own, and do this on his own. It's just so good. It's like, even though he was
he's
already
re-engaging, yeah,
even though he was doing a lot of that stuff before, it just seemed like it got sparsed out the more he became king. The more he had to be the figurehead and not the man of action. And now he's taking all of that on, and it's incredible. Yeah, they begin by playing the beautiful song,
yes,
Carmina
George Orff.
Yes, O Fortuna, and it's incredible.
It's one of my favorites. It's one of the scenes that stuck with me from when I was a kid, with the peach blossoms kind of blowing past them, and they're kind of just riding it. It just sticks with you.
Yeah, I mean, just incredible camera work. Like, you couldn't time this better. You couldn't time this better with those blossoms falling, and the music, just the rhythm of it, the rhythm of the writing is just incredible. They make it look so epic as they go through all of these different scapes, and just show them that all they're doing is riding, and they're looking magnificent as the horses are just prancing and galloping. I would say galloping.
Yeah.
They're really like going for it, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah. Well, it's the return of the king, right? The king's back. They got their mojo back, and now they're doing something about it, something that's been lacking.
It's such a special moment in film history, in the movie, just in general too. Just to see this moment, you are filled with so much hope that they're going to win this battle, and Arthur will be victorious once more. So
right.
Well, they're riding to go see Gwenny Pooh.
That's right.
She is actually in a nunnery, and I love this particular still of him, because the way he looks at her, he is still madly in love with this woman.
Yeah.
the sparks for him are still there. And you know that she still loves him, but it's not it's not a romantic love at all. It's more like, I wouldn't say like quite a best friend, but it doesn't feel the same with the same fire.
Right. She respects him, she honors him, but it's not husband and wife, anymore. That's missing.
Yeah, that's missing for her, but he really has it for her intensely. And it was actually this scene for sure. And I hope I'm not going to cry, right? Oh, it's so sweet because he has another monologue I think he has like two of them that are really about him. Ooh. Oh, sorry about this.
You're going to get stung by it. Hey, there's no shame in it. These movies do this to us,
Yeah, this is part of the redemption wing I was telling you about.
Right.
Because he does kind of redeem her, or he kind of like absolves her of her guilt, or carrying the weight of what he feels he was guilty of, or didn't have a complete mastery over his ability to be her husband, or the man.
Right. Yeah, he's accepting some responsibility for the events that occurred.
Yes, and well said. And I feel like they were whoever wrote this they were writing some really powerful stuff. Her response is that she loved him as king, but sometimes as a husband. And it really was telling, because it's like, yeah, he had to be the king first, and she was always going to be number two. Like she wasn't going to be his main focus. And she wanted that kind of love.
Right.
She wanted a powerful man, but she wanted a powerful man that would give her 100% of his love all the time. He was not able to do that.
Right. She felt a little neglect.
Yes. And one thing she said that was very interesting is that she says, one cannot gaze too long at the sun. And I was like, so his position in life, or his responsibility. Oh, you said, okay. Oh, do you want to say it?
Raspo Pallenberg and John Boorman wrote the script. So you were like, whoever wrote this did a fantastic job. That's who wrote it. Those two guys.
Incredible stuff. Incredible. Just her saying that, one cannot gaze too long at the sun. It just feels like she was overwhelmed with his presence. Like it's almost like being the wife of someone who's got to, rule, a huge country, which that's what he was, like they're off ruling the country. You have to have a certain amount of temperance within yourself to be okay with that.
Right.
And not want the attention, and not want 100% of their time. Allow them the chance to be there for other people, since they're so important. It's a beautiful line. I always get stuck on that line. I was like, I get a little teary-eyed too, for what she must have been feeling, and also what he must have been feeling, for like, I'm a man who is a king, but I also want to love somebody, So, but I don't want to have to lose them because I'm not loving them enough.
Well, right. There's the king, and then there's the man. And that was part of his problem with championing her, right? And you get a sense that he really, really wanted more of the side, the man, just being a man side of him. That's probably what was lost, because he didn't champion her. We said that was probably an error on his part, and by being the king, he lost this part of his humanity in a way.
Yeah.
And this is him trying to recover it.
Oh, yeah. And then he gives this incredible speech that really fills in what you just said about it. He's like, I wasn't born like other people. I was born to be of legend.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, he's so, like, I love the self-awareness, and also like, yeah.
I was pulling up the script.
Yeah, I love the self-awareness, and just like the zeroing in on exactly what went wrong here.
Yeah, he goes, forgive me, my wife, if you can, but I was not born to live a man's life, but to be the stuff of future memory. I mean, that's kind of what I was talking about, the burden of perfection being put on a character, and then having to live up to that.
Yeah.
And then I think that's kind of what she's saying. You tried to live up to this incredible legend status, you know, you
Yeah.
staring into the sun, you know, or she's staring into the sun, and it's too much. It's an overwhelming, it's an impossible task.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
Just incredible.
cost to
Yeah.
that. you know.
Yes, yes, yes. You know, he does say, you know, I wish, you know, in the afterlife you would be my wife there. And I think for his benefit, she does smile, and you know, but I think in actuality, she wants to be with Sir Lancelot.
Lancelot. Right.
But one of the things that he says is that, you know, he tells her that he's going off to war again, but she pulls out of nowhere, right under the bed, Excalibur. And so I think even the audience
Yes.
forgot that she still had that it would have been in her keeping. We just thought it was lost, but
Right.
she had it all this time.
Yeah, and that's important symbolism too. You know, sometimes holding on to something is meaning that you still value something of the past.
Yeah.
You weren't ready to completely let go of it, and this reconciles
Yes.
that path, that truth between them. You know, you get a sense that they're older now; they see it through different eyes, and you know, it's less egregious of an error. It's more understandable. It's more forgivable in retrospect.
Yes, and I would say she would be the keeper of the flame at this point, and they have a fire right behind them.
Yes.
She's the keeper. She's the one that has been keeping Excalibur, this magical and mythical object that, you know, that makes kings, and you know, and unites lands.
Yeah, the
She's
truth.
got it underneath her bed.
Yeah, it's also been a symbol of truth in the film, and and he's recovering the truth in a different way. You know, the king and the land are one. So it is interesting that she is the keeper of this symbol.
Yes, I love it. I love when he gets his hands on it, because it's like, yes, we've got Excalibur back. We're about to do some
back
damage.
together.
Yeah. And I always, again, the armor looks so cool. And yeah, just that speech there is just incredible. Just wonderful writing there. And this is the sadness I was saying that she had on her face as he was leaving. It's just sort of like, you know, she smiles for his benefit, but I think her mind is always going to be on the love that she briefly had with Sir Lancelot. So it's kind of a sad story, but also, you know, there he is in his regalia. He's ready to go off to war, and they settle in for the night for the final battle. Before the battle, he goes to Stonehenge. This is, you know, this is actually must be really close to Cornwall's castle. He is there to have a talk with Merlin, I guess spiritually. He knows, you know, he's not around anymore, but he's like, "Where are you, Merlin?" You know, and talking to himself, but he's also like speaking fondly of Merlin. And then he hits the stone, and that reaches Merlin, and it shakes the coils of the dragon, and and Merlin is awakened. And it's very interesting, because he says that Arthur's love brought him back, and it is not fully back to the real world. He is he can only be in the dream world for now, but it's somewhere, right? And so yeah, he's still physically trapped in this thing that Morgana has placed him in. I believe in the real myth, he is trapped in a sleepless. He's still awake, but he's in a tomb. So that's
okay.
Yeah, so that's a play on that. Arthur takes a nap, and from the nap, he's able to talk to Merlin. And it's only a brief moment, but he seems to understand then that Merlin can really talk to them in dreams from now on. And so it's really great. He's like, you know, he does that. Is it a dream or a nightmare or something like that? But
and that's the return of the guide in the hero's journey motif. You have the loss of the guide, and then there's usually a return of the guide, which I think is actually a very important symbolic or archetypal reoccurrence. This idea that that at some point, you know, you lose the giver of wisdom, and you are on your own, And then at some point, the giver of wisdom returns. And it's usually after you've accomplished something or done something on your own. I believe that the return of the guide echoes a human experience of when you lose someone in real life,
Yeah.
they don't come back, right?
No.
They're gone.
Yeah.
However, you remember them. And there are several moments that happen in your life where you're like, oh my goodness, they would say that this means this or that.
Yes.
You hear their voice in your head, right?
Yes.
And in a weird way, whatever wisdom they imparted on you, it lives on when your mind summons them again, and you're like, that's what the wise guys, that's what they taught me. And then maybe you pass it on. So I think in a story sense, that living on of the wisdom in your mind, the spirit of the person, your mentor, manifests itself as the actual return of the guide, which is a very powerful thing to witness in stories, that the guide isn't lost in story world. The guide is somewhere. And even in this one, like you're talking about, he's not on Earth. So he is, but he's somewhere, like you said.
Yeah.
And that's comforting for us to watch in stories, that the guide isn't lost permanently.
Yeah, it's soothing. It really is. So I was like, yes, Merlin's back.
Yeah, Merlin's back.
And he can do quite a lot. I thought this was a wonderful moment. He's right next to Mordred, but Mordred can't see him because he is in the dream realm. And he makes a visit to Morgana, who is looking, just as gorgeous as ever. She is dreaming, and this is where he's able to affect her. He kind of tricks her into using the charm of making to conjure up a fog, but also that particular spell that she's conjuring up while she's sleeping. They do a really interesting effect where the smoke is coming out of her mouth, and I think they have like a tube right at the side of her mouth or something with smoke.
Yeah, that was a cool scene.
It was very cool. And so she's conjuring up this fog, but it's also taking away her beauty. So I thought that was very interesting.
The breath of the dragon.
Yes. And this is well played by Merlin in particular. He gets revenge, but she gets her comeuppance, if you will. Which and I still feel like I want to say she's innocent, but she does take that dark turn, as you mentioned, that really creates this monster that is completely vain and unfeeling to the point where she kills all these people that she used to know at court. And that's gotta be a bad thing.
I mean, you've crossed the line.
You've crossed the line, and people that's really awful. So.
I mean, she undoes it all. Like, she's definitely a force of destruction and chaos.
And chaos, yes. And she is now, I wouldn't even say this is her true age. This must be like, it must have really taken her even like like another 50 years more. Yeah. When her son comes in, I think he recognizes her, but he doesn't want to. He just kills her. And it's brutal because
she's killed by her own creation.
Yeah, she's, I love that. I love the poetic justice, if you will. But it's interesting because here we have the vanity playing into it again. Like loses her beauty. Her son is so appalled by it. He has never been trained to be acceptant or to understand anything other than perfection. He immediately, his first immediate goal is to kill it, whatever it is. He doesn't have any questions, even if it could be his mother. So that's pretty sad. On the battlefield, it's getting crazy. The war has begun, and who shows up but Sir Lancelot? He is a fierce fighter on the battlefield for sure, and just really helps out in Arthur's time of need. There's a very moving scene of redemption this time for Sir Lancelot, where he is forgiven for the past. One of the things that he asks, which also is an example of his love for Guinevere, is what about her? Is she still queen? Is she queen again? Or, how is she doing? And so it was very telling when that happened, how much he loved her.
Did she ask about me?
Yeah, did she ask him? So it was really it's really funny, and but it was definitely a very moving moment because you could see the love between the two, and the result of this weird situation, this love triangle, and the effects that it caused them so much pain. But it was
Right.
basically his old wound from when he was in the forest that really did him in,
Right.
and
Well,
so
right. That wound didn't, which is also a form of poetic justice, not in the mean way, but like this was the wound that could not heal. And so I think he's okay with that wound being the one that gets him,
yes, 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 yes. Yeah, so it was a very moving last few moments with that character. Then we get the big showdown.
Yep.
Everybody's dead pretty much except for Percival and
King Arthur.
King Arthur, and we have Mordred left, and Percival is about to go take care of business, and Arthur says, "No, I'll take care of it." And I thought that was very much in line with his new promise to be the one to go and deal with this.
Right. Well, and we were saying earlier when he first meets Lancelot, the
Yeah.
bridge,
Yes.
I was saying there is some of what he's doing that's not ego driven, in that, I will do this. I will let me do it. I'll handle it. I'm the
Yes.
king. I'm the big dog. So there is something positive about that thinking. And I think this is the positive side of it. Like, this is the undefeatable monster. Let your king handle this one.
Yes, and Percival is the one to defend Guinevere with that whole situation,
Right.
and takes the place of where King Arthur should have been. This is his redemption, to actually be there, to say, okay, look, I'm going in front this time, because
Right.
because whatever happened when he, from way back when he faced off against Sir Lancelot, he did it, but it was for the wrong reasons. But
Right.
and he should have done it for Guinevere for the right reasons then. And now he's actually like, okay, I'm doing it. It's my responsibility to take care of this particular phone, especially it's his son. So there's like that other edge to it, a problem he created and he now has to put to bed.
Right.
And then we get this epic moment that is like been repeated in many other movies. We've got Mordred stabbing King Arthur, and the lance going through him.
Right.
And he pulls himself all the way up to be closer to Mordred so he can get close enough to stab him and kill him. And that is
Right.
how he gets rid of the bad guy, is or this is how he gets rid of Mordred, is by doing this incredible thing, enduring the pain of that lance being struck all the way through him, and getting, just so he can get close enough to get rid of his enemy. And it's pretty epic. It's been used in so many movies. I believe there was Star Trek Nemesis used it, Shinzon's death scene, and also 300, when the captain dies, is an epic moment in that film where he's stabbed by a spear and he just like pulls himself closer so that he could kill like 3 other guys. It was just great. Just great. What a great moment. But this is definitely like one of those moments you never forget. I don't think I've ever seen it before ever done, where a character puts himself in that kind of danger, actually getting stabbed, mortally wounded, so they can get closer to the enemy.
Well, it's a gambit, right? Because they both go down, and that's kind of the La Morte d'Arthur is the death of Arthur. So this is it. This is the payoff, and it's heroic, but it's also, you get a sense of it's tragic. And this was a destruction. Everything's gone after this, right? Except Parcel.
Yeah, and it speaks of the sacrifice he was willing to make sure that the future was safe.
Right.
And this whole time, honestly, which is really astounding for Arthur as a character, he's still thinking about the future, about what, how this will affect the land. He knows that if Mordred is alive, what terror he would bring about. I mean,
Yeah, he must be destroyed.
yeah, he must be destroyed at all costs, even to my own. And then after that, his insistence on making sure that Excalibur was placed in the proper hands, so to speak.
Yeah.
So he speaks to Percival and says, take Excalibur, find a body of water, and throw it in the water. And Percival agrees. He tries to do it and he can't. He just can't. It's too shiny. It's too important. It's too
Cast
magical.
it into the fire.
It's an important piece of history. He can't do it. And he comes back, he lies and says, "Oh yes, I threw it in the water." And King Arthur says, "What happened?" And he's like, "Oh, nothing." He's like, "Go back
Bro,
and
you
throw it
didn't
into the water." It's like, and it's really like really powerful that we have, even though Percival, we've already established he's the best of them right now,
Yes.
and even he was taken in by the beauty of the sword and maybe even the power of it.
Yeah.
And the temptation of possibly having this relic, this incredible relic. He has to do what King Arthur told him to do. So he goes,
Right.
he does it. And it is one of the most beautiful moments because he does it at this time with a lot more gusto, a lot more faith, and he just tosses it, and what there's a hand that just reaches out from the water to catch it. It's the Lady of the Lake, and the music is insane.
Awesome music here. I love it.
And just the gloriousness of it is just so incredible. I'm not sure how they filmed it, where she caught the, I
must be in reverse. She must have thrown it and then caught it, and then just thrown it and then they played it in reverse.
Yeah, or I was thinking maybe they played it in reverse, but they had a string on the sword, because the way she catches it is like she doesn't even move very much. She's like, her hand is up and then she just catches it. It's just beautiful.
Oh, interesting. That's true. Yeah, I'll have to rewatch that. That's pretty interesting.
But it's so, with the music is why
it's
just,
well, the music really almost makes it feel like, an opera. Or something like you're at the opera and this is the final scene of it.
Yes. I think that is the most magical part of this movie, is the music and how they attach it to the images. They correspond it to the images in a way that brings up a beautiful feeling inside, and it's just so inspiring.
Right.
This scene here is just like, what?
Yeah. Totally.
It's
the imagery in this is fantastic.
Yeah, you just wonder, like, is that real? And there's a lady in the lake for real that they have underwater holding up that sword, and it's incredible. And then when Percival comes back to get King Arthur, he's not there anymore. Oh my God, I hope I don't get teary-eyed. He's on a ship taking him to Avalon. And so it's so beautiful, especially again with the music, how this is filmed. It looks beautiful. It looks very, very incredible. And then you get a little bit of a close-up of the ladies that are on the ship taking him to Avalon with this outstanding music. And then there's this incredible visual that is just so glorious. I mean, it's the ship far off into the distance, and then the heavens. It just looks so beautiful with that incredible music. It ends perfectly with this idea that, King Arthur has fulfilled his destiny, and he's off to Avalon, and now the world has to continue without him,
Without him.
without a king, without a sword.
Yeah,
But
like
he's,
the magic of this whole scenario is bookended. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
it started and then it ended, and now it's up to us mortals to
yes,
figure out for ourselves what to do next.
yes. The legend has gone off to his next adventure in the hereafter, and it's just incredible. I absolutely love this film so much.
Well, and there is something that occurs a lot in hero's journey stories, the idea of the isolation of the hero.
Yes.
You know, the man at the end is not the same that we began with.
Oh,
And
for sure.
even in his nobility and his legend, in that he is lonely.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
he has become isolated. Like Frodo in Lord of the Rings, he cannot reintegrate in the Shire. He has to leave. He has to go to the Grey Havens. Almost a very similar type of ending for Frodo. You know, Conan. There's that image of Conan
Oh,
in the
yes,
throne
on the
by
throne.
himself,
Yeah.
alone. You know, so there is this sense that you have achieved something. You know, it's kind of like looking into the sun too much. You've achieved something that no one else has the same frame of reference for. So in that you are forever alone. And so there is this sort of strange isolation of the hero at the end of these stories, where that's why we call it riding off into the sunset.
Yes.
In the Western, the hero rides off into the sunset.
Yeah.
There's no place for him where he can just live an ordinary life. And
Yeah.
because of that, he must go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And this is a very recurrent archetypal finale for many heroes. And it is the finale of Arthur.
Yeah, and when it ends, there isn't sadness, right? You would think that there would be an intense sadness. He's the hero of our story just died, or he's gone from this plane. But there still is a sense of triumph. It still makes me feel uplifted. It doesn't have the effect of making you feel sad or anything, but you've just watched an epic story. And
it's the conclusion of these epic events and these epic characters, and I think the music sets the tone too.
Oh, it does. Yes.
There's a triumphal send off to the music.
Yeah,
we did it basically. Is the feeling.
Yes, and we did it. We've gotten through the entire movie moment by moment, and I really felt like we had to, because of all of the little details that are in this film that are just remarkable.
Oh yeah.
Is it? We've mentioned that it's not a perfect film, but it definitely has remarkable moments, and it definitely tells a remarkable story.
Oh yeah.
And, it's just incredible. I will probably be looking at this story more and more every year. I think, because it's one of those that I love just refreshing on and just seeing. Because I swear, if I haven't gotten more information about this film just by watching it more,
right.
And just like the details that are right there. And, you see it the first time, not going to get it. When I was a kid, I wasn't paying attention to a lot of the symbolism and all that stuff. But now, as I've gotten older, I've been able to really pinpoint those things.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. And that is part of why this has legs, right? This is why there's some staying power and some timelessness to it. I think I've mentioned several times that, the great ones, you can unpack them forever. And then the bad stories, the more you unpack them, the more it falls apart. And there's nothing there in the center. And so when you have a movie like Excalibur that really, lives and dies on these timeless mythological events and themes and motifs, the power of all that sitting in there. So even if the film is imperfectly done, even if there's some clumsy aspects to the way this was put together, or budgetary problems or hard cuts, it won't matter, because it's still sitting on this powerful, temple of storytelling underneath. And that is what persists. So I think Excalibur will continue to age well, despite any of the flaws that may have been part of it.
Yes, and in particular, the acting was absolutely incredible.
Oh
And
yeah.
again, also just those iconic moments that visually that you will never forget. The music,
Well, and I looked it
the
up. I was on IMDb, and I looked up pretty much every actor and actress in this, and except for Helen Mirren, almost every actor in this film, or and Liam Neeson as well, almost every actor, this was one of their top. Like IMDb always says they're known for this, and they give like 4 movies. Like
yes.
they're the 4 movies that this actor or actress is most known for, and in most cases, the actors and actresses of this film, this is the film that they were known for.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I think we talked about it in the Clash of the Titans, just how that stage presence, that theatrical performance, really
Yes.
makes a difference in a tale like this. I think it's needed, right? I mean, I feel like you couldn't just play King Arthur like like Joe Schmo down the street. You really need someone to transform for the
Elevate.
role. Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, and when I think about Excalibur and the faces of they're the Knights of the Round Table for me. This movie did leave that impression that this is the story of King Arthur.
I mean, and no one has been able to capture the opulence and the grandeur of
the dreamlike qualities, with the, like you said, the sheen off the metal and the glinting and the starlight lighting effects and all that. All of that.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, and the powerful color green when it appears in this with the silver mirror-like, metals and everything. So that always leaves an impression on me with Excalibur.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Oh my God. Well, I'm so glad to do this wonderful, wonderful discussion with you. Can you tell everybody what you're going to be up to anytime soon?
Yeah, I will be starting a YouTube channel very shortly, in which I will be not only trying to introduce the Heroine's Labyrinth to the world more directly, but I will also be sharing, the love of storytelling in general. We'll be looking at movies and archetypes, and similar to kind of what we did tonight, Retro, where we're looking at a story and then figuring out what about this scene? Why does this scene pop? Is there something archetypal or timeless about it? Does this fit anywhere else? Is there anything? Is there a recurrent, powerful aspect to this? What does the legend say? All those kinds of questions that play a part in storytelling, I plan on looking at as well. The tagline is the creative tradition. These stories are part of that tradition, and what we're doing is, by talking about it, we're keeping it alive, keeping that.
Yes, that's my mission, is to keep this alive. We're going to have a link for Douglas in the description, so I'm going to have him go down there and take a look at that. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation, and if you are interested in more content just like this, you can browse my channel. Also, YouTube is going to suggest a video for you to watch, and that will help the channel greatly and allow me the opportunity to make more content like this. Now, without further ado, I bid you adieu, and I'll see you soon.
I'm sorry, real quick, just a quick cut. Can you hear those dogs?
I just heard them. Yeah.
Because they're starting to drive me nuts.
No,
give me one. Let me go put them up in their crate. Otherwise, this might keep happening. They're all queued up from Halloween, from all the people knocking on. Now every sound is triggering them. So give me 1 second. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I was like, wait, Doug, there could be a Terminator outside.
Wolfie's just fine, Retro. Wolfie's just fine. Your foster parents are dead.